Our story kicks off at a bustling land center, where everyone was talking about how the player known as Kang-chi had once again snagged the top spot on the game's brand new map. The map had just dropped, but he was already dominating the leaderboards in a game called Dungeoncraft, where players get to build their very own dungeons. And yet, Kang-chi was always number one. Another player couldn't help but wonder out loud how he pulled it off every single time, while someone else muttered that he had to be using bots to play for him. Hearing this, Kang-chi himself just stayed quiet. His buddy overheard the comment and asked why he bothered playing at the LAN center when he could easily afford a setup at home. Kang-chi just shrugged, saying he really liked the food there, and what can you do? Without missing a beat, he announced he clinched first place again and told the others to get ready for him. This made another player scoff that he talked like it was no big deal, saying he really did sound like a bot. And to himself, Kang-chi thought, well, they're not entirely wrong. The only real fun he had in life was playing this game and conquering every map. Later on, as he was saying goodbye to his friend, he thought about why he was so obsessed with the game, and the answer was pretty simple. In the real world, he had zero control over anything. But in the game, anything was possible. He could even do simple things like move misplaced power poles, something you could never do in real life, but in the game, they were gone with just a click of the mouse. Right as he was lost in that thought, a truck came barreling down the street and nearly flattened him. He couldn't help but think how cruel reality was. You can't just delete a truck when you want to. Luckily, the driver slammed on the brakes just in time, and he was safe. The driver leaned out the window, yelling and asking if he was crazy, but Kang-chi just calmly pointed up at the crosswalk signal, which was clearly green for him. The driver just looked confused, totally baffled about when the light changed. It just made Kang-chi even more frustrated with a world where he couldn't fix things like he could in the game. If he could just rewrite the code of reality, he'd create a world that was perfect. And right at that moment, an iron beam snapped loose from a nearby construction site and came plummeting down towards a little girl playing without a care in the world. Even as he thought it was a pretty dangerous and frankly dumb place to be playing, Kang-chi felt a surge of purpose. Maybe, just this once, he could control something. He took off, running to save the kid, thinking that, if nothing else, he realized that this was just how life was. Even trying to be a good guy came with a hefty price. Suddenly, everything went black, and he found himself in a strange, otherworldly space, almost like he was floating outside his own body. It felt like he'd been sucked into a black hole, but strangely enough, he didn't seem to be, dead. A mysterious voice called out to him, and then this huge, celestial being with 3 eyes appeared out of nowhere. She told him it was time to face the music. Kang-chi was totally clueless about this place she called Oblivion. The celestial being explained that death was just a gateway to reincarnation, and that he was getting a second shot at life to get his memories back. None of this was making any sense to Kang-chi, so he asked her to break it down for him. But instead, the being just commanded him to open his eyes. And just like that, a strange energy zapped his mind, and he abruptly woke up in a completely different body. He found himself in a lonely room inside what looked like a castle, feeling totally helpless. He stumbled over to a mirror and saw the reflection of a demon staring back at him. That demon was him. He was in total shock. He was sure he had died, but here he was, in a new body with a whole new look. He had no idea if this was the afterlife, some kind of video game, or a crazy anime prank. Everything felt way too real to be just a dream. Okay. First things first, he needed to figure out where he was. Looking around, he quickly realized he was in an ancient castle with classic medieval architecture. Suddenly, a new voice snapped him out of it, asking how long he was planning to stand there, muttering to himself. The next thing he knew, a blade was shoved straight through his chest. He could barely even react, just coughing up blood as he watched the crazy woman who'd stabbed him laugh like it was all a big joke. She stared down at him with pure contempt, clearly savoring the pain she was causing, and all Kang-chi could think was, wow, that really hurts, as she'd run him through with such brutal force. He just wanted to know why she did it, and the girl casually explained that, well, she just really disliked him and figured this was the best way to get him out of the picture. Simple as that, really. She was just about to finish the job when, out of nowhere, a surprise guest showed up and neatly disarmed her with a single, expert move. It was a long-haired guy holding a whip, and the woman, totally caught off guard, asked Tarm why he was crashing her party. Tarm just looked at her and pointed out that she probably shouldn't do that, seeing as Kang-chi was, her brother. Kang-chi was just getting more confused by the second, wondering who this new guy was. Tarm strolled over to him, cool as a cucumber, called him Kella, and said it looked like Caldera was giving him a hard time again. He then offered him a little something to drink, which looked a lot like a healing potion. Kella, thinking it was just a regular potion, took a swig, but the second that stuff hit his throat, he immediately spit it all out, feeling a fiery sensation from head to toe. It was way too spicy to be a normal potion that was straight up poison. Caldera just watched with a deadpan expression and asked if he was going to kick the bucket, making it pretty obvious that was her whole plan from the start. Tarm took a look at the situation and noted that Kella certainly seemed to be in a lot of pain, but unfortunately, it didn't look like he was actually going to check out. So, he declared the recipe an official failure. Kella, through all the agony, could only wonder what he did to deserve this and why his life had to be so incredibly difficult. Right on cue, the huge castle doors swung open. The Demon King, Hellcin himself, was back from a little trip hunting heroes. The moment they sensed him, Caldera and Tarm piped up, asking if their dad was home. Hearing this, Kella's brain short-circuited. What did they mean, father? He was floored by the sudden realization that the Demon King was supposed to be his dad. The king strode in and demanded to know why his house sounded like a rowdy frat party. Kella stared at him, still struggling to process that this guy was the actual Demon King. Caldera immediately tried to shift the blame, pointing her finger and saying it was all Kella's fault. But the king was not interested in hearing any excuses. He grabbed both kids by the scruff of their necks, calling their little squabble a complete embarrassment. As cries and whimpers of pain filled the Demon King's castle, the two siblings got on their knees and begged their father for forgiveness. Kella, watching this whole chaotic scene unfold, started to wonder if these two lunatics really were his siblings, which would mean that he was the son of that absolute monster. The king then announced that inside his castle, he only wanted to hear two very specific sounds: the birth of a mighty demon, or the honorable demise of an enemy. Then, in a fit of rage, he casually brought his foot down on Kella's head. With all three of them left on the verge of shuffling off this mortal coil, Kella finally accepted that he'd really been reborn in another world. And to top it all off, he was the son of the Demon King. It felt like he'd hit the absolute worst-case scenario jackpot. He couldn't help but think, of all the people in the world, why did it have to be him? Just then, he remembered a special moment with his mother. He was crying his eyes out because Sella had decided to introduce a fork to his eyeball. His mother, rather than offering any comfort, just remarked that it must have stung quite a bit. Kella then told her that Tom had tried to poison his dinner. His mother just replied that, in that case, he should return the favor, because that's what a proper demon would do. Kella shot back that if he tried something like that, he'd be the one to end up dead. His mother's advice? Just make sure to get them before they get you. She proudly pointed out that his own father took out his brothers when he was only 12 years old to become the Demon King. Her message was crystal clear. If someone tries to take you out, you need to take them out first. She then pulled out a dagger and, for good measure, plunged it right into her son's stomach. She told him this was how a demon handled business, and then asked if he understood, all while he was crying from the pain of being shivved by his own mom. And then, Kella woke up in his bed, gasping for air. His personal attendant, Ren, asked if he was feeling okay. Kella realized that the body he was now in held all of Hellcin's traumatic memories. And yet, despite all that awful stuff, his body had already patched itself up completely. Looked like he came with some pretty high-end regeneration powers. Ren mentioned that he'd been out for a while and that it was almost time for the family dinner. Kella looked over at her, remembering how as a kid, Ren was always so quiet and reserved compared to his other siblings. He was always the one getting looked down on. Even Ren, his own attendant, would pick out his party clothes but would never actually help him get dressed. Kella even brought up that he heard his brother's maid helped him get dressed, to which Ren just said that in that case, maybe he could dress her instead. Kella got the hint that this was pure sarcasm and decided, you know what, fine, he'd just dress himself. Another time, Ren conveniently passed one of her chores onto him, telling him to go clean the deck. One day, she'd be sleeping in his bed, and the next, she'd stick a doll in her place to skip work. Kella couldn't help but wonder how the original owner of this body ever let a simple servant walk all over him. Well, he was in charge now, and there was no way he was putting up with that kind of disrespect anymore. He'd been pushed around, despised, and treated like yesterday's garbage for his entire life. He soon realized this new world wasn't much different from his last one. In the end, it's always the weak who get taken out first. At the family dinner, he was late, and his father called him out in a cold, commanding voice. Kella could feel the intense pressure of his presence. I mean, the guy was the Demon King. It's no wonder everyone was terrified of him. He quickly made his excuses and sat down in his chair. Caldera's response was to casually plunge a knife straight into his leg. The pain was sharp and very real, and even Caldera's maid laughed it off like it was some big joke. Caldera then commented that he wasn't looking too lively and that he should probably eat up. All Kella could think was that he couldn't let anyone find out he'd taken over this body. For now, he just had to bear with it. The moment he started to eat, he realized the food was poisoned again. Caldera, with a faint little smile, mentioned she'd made a special soup just for him and asked if it was any good. Kella said it was, but inside, he was absolutely seething. He thought to himself that these crazy demons weren't his family. They were his enemies. This couldn't go on for much longer. He had to do something. He had always wanted to accomplish something, to do something great with his life. He was the best map designer in the game Dungeoncraft, yet in the real world, he was always getting pushed around and never had the courage to fight back. He refused to die a pointless death like he did before. The anger inside him just boiled over, and without a second thought, he grabbed the poisoned soup and threw it right in Caldera's face, telling her she should give it a try, too. Then, he decided to return the little gift she had given him earlier. He yanked the knife out of his leg and chucked it right into Tarm's shoulder. He then faced the Demon King and asked if it wasn't about time they put a stop to these lovely family dinners. In a complete rage, he flipped the table and announced that from this day forward, everyone would eat alone. The whole room was just shocked by his audacity. Kella angrily thought to himself that now he'd get to see how this bunch of psychos would react. A little later, he was feeling pretty good. He had done what he wanted, but of course, after a stunt like that, he was stomped to death by his own father. However, he recovered in a surprisingly short amount of time and felt a strange, powerful force building up inside of him. At that moment, he knew he really was the son of the Demon King, and what he wanted to find out more than anything was just how strong this new power could become. Ren warned him that it was almost time for his demon power lesson and he needed to hurry to the hall, but Kella just told her to be quiet, snapping that he already knew. Ren was stunned, wondering when he had become so harsh and decisive. Kella thought that this demon power lesson, according to the original body's memories, was one of the absolute worst experiences he had ever gone through. But even so, that wasn't a good enough reason to skip it. Over in the training hall, the instructor announced that Lady Caldera and Lord Tarm would be sitting out of class that day, so only the other royal children would be tested. Kella glanced at the others, recognizing their faces from the old Kella's memories. He remembered how terrified he used to be when they intimidated him, and he knew these demons took advantage of every single weakness to beat him up, humiliate him, and then have a good laugh about it later. Caldera used to just watch while he was being tortured, complaining that they were going too easy on him. And since she held all the authority there, the others followed her orders and beat him even harder. Kella recalled always thinking that he didn't want to fight, and he could feel that the original body had a heart that was just too soft. It was weakness. But now, everything was different. Kang-chi was in the driver's seat, and he decided he was going to use his strength the right way. The instructor asked what the final duel was in the last class, and one of the bullies stepped forward, saying it was between him and Kella, or rather, Sir Kella, he added with a sneer. Kella immediately started to get ticked off. The instructor agreed to set up another duel between them. The bully smirked and asked if Kella was ready for round 2, while the other students were already whispering that he was about to be beaten half to death again. Some even snickered, saying not to make the young master cry in front of everyone. Kella couldn't decide what was more irritating, the jeers from the crowd or the moron standing right in front of him. Kang-chi realized that he and the original Kella were actually a lot alike. In his past life, he was broke and powerless too, constantly looked down on and humiliated. But that was all in the past. As he focused his energy, a terrifying pressure washed over everyone nearby. They all wondered when he'd gotten so much mana, while the bully in front of him was frozen stiff, completely paralyzed by fear. Kella calmly said he'd go easy on him, just one punch. But when that punch landed, he didn't just hit him. He slammed the demon's face into the dirt with so much force, it was like tossing out a bag of trash. The entire crowd was stunned into silence. Rude, the bully, was completely speechless, and the instructor just couldn't believe what he had just seen. Poor Rude was a total mess, with missing teeth, a swelling black eye, and was mumbling incoherently. Kella then coldly asked what he'd said earlier, questioning how he dared talk to the Demon King's son that way. Rude, looking completely defeated, immediately apologized to Sir Kella. Kella warned him that he'd better not slip up in front of him ever again, because next time, he wouldn't be leaving in one piece. Everyone was completely freaked out, wondering what on earth had happened to him, because this was definitely not the same Kella they knew. He then turned to the instructor, who practically jumped just hearing his name, and asked if class was going to continue as usual. The instructor stuttered, "Why, yes, of course." Meanwhile, Ren watched silently from the side, thinking Kella was acting really weird. The Demon King was also watching the class, observing every single detail. Later, back at the Demon Castle, Caldera was soaking in a recovery tub, her body covered in injuries, fuming about how that jerk had the nerve to throw a poison potion right in her face. Tarm, who was with her, urged her to calm down and just focus on healing, reminding her that she couldn't regenerate as fast as Kella. Caldera agreed that was strange, commenting that it made no sense for Kella to be the only one with such an advanced healing ability. Tarm then added that it seemed like Kella had gone through some kind of major transformation because he was like a completely different person now. It was at that moment Tarm realized something else. Even their father seemed happy about what Kella had done. He mentioned it was the first time he'd ever seen his father genuinely smile. Caldera scoffed, saying she highly doubted that smile was because of Kella, but Tarm insisted it wasn't normal and something strange was definitely going on. When Caldera asked what he was getting at, he replied that while she'd probably rather die than team up with Kella, maybe they could at least call a truce for a little while to keep an eye on him together. To his surprise, Caldera agreed it wasn't a terrible idea, but she made one thing crystal clear. If Kella made a single wrong move, she'd take him out herself before he could get any more of their father's attention. Meanwhile, Kella was in a class where the instructor was displaying a magical hologram of the last Demon King, Hellcin, who had the face of a complete and utter psycho, which made Kella think, wow, that guy really looks the part. The instructor explained that Turhel had been the most powerful demon of his time, but he was ultimately taken down by a cowardly plot, betrayed by the Celestial Guild and a bunch of other opportunistic guilds who took the chance to seize a piece of the demon kingdom. This information clicked for Kella, as it lined up with the new memories he had of those very guilds surrounding the kingdom. The instructor also mentioned that because of those darn guilds, the current Demon King could hardly even leave the castle, making him essentially a prisoner in his own home. He also said that the Celestial Guild, the biggest one around since its founding, was gearing up for an attack on the Demon Kingdom. So, the students had to train their tails off in combat class if they wanted to help the king get rid of these clowns. Inspired, all the students recited an oath together, vowing to fight for the honor of all demons. Sometime after that, Kella was standing alone, looking out at the horizon and trying to figure out his next move. He felt that staying put was a death sentence. So, he went and asked Ren if her father was really going to be away for 3 days. She confirmed that he was. Kella then asked her if she knew of any weaknesses in the castle, like an old architectural map they could use to gain an edge in a fight. He pointed out that their enemies were taking advantage of the neglected territories nearby to launch attacks on the castle, but he planned to use the upcoming expedition to map out the whole area and then hand it all over to his dad to wipe out every single one of them. Kella figured this would be his new role. He also mentioned he was going to create a dungeon, separate from normal reality, so he could draw the map however he wanted. With that, he ordered Ren to immediately build him a secret office down in the castle's basement. When she asked what exactly the office was for, Kella told her he needed a private place to work, somewhere his father wouldn't find out about. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's personal recovery tub, he was quietly thinking that he couldn't take his eyes off Kella anymore. Before it was too late, he had to confirm something with his son in person. Later, Kella showed up in the basement and, looking at the mess, asked if this was the office he requested. Ren explained that since it had to be secret, this was the best she could do. Kella commented that she could be a little more careful next time, and Ren thought to herself that he'd been treating her more firmly lately, which, surprisingly, seemed to be working. She also thought Kella had been a little scary recently because he wasn't the same boy he used to be. Even so, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him now that he was starting to act like a real man. Then, Kella looked at Ren and asked why she was still just standing there, ordering her to get him some coffee immediately. Ren scurried off to follow his command, repeating, "Coffee, coffee," as she tried to figure out what on earth that was, having never heard of it. As she disappeared into the castle, completely confused, Kella thought that he was finally alone and could now analyze the map in peace. He realized the Demon King's castle was built in the absolute worst spot for defense, so he decided to create a whole new map himself based on his past memories and experiences. Meanwhile, Ren was still dashing through the corridors, with no clue what she was looking for when she ran right into the Demon King himself. He asked what she was doing in the basement without Kella and demanded to know where his son was and what he was doing. Ren got super nervous, remembering Kella's order to keep it a secret, but the king insisted that she answer him. While she was hesitating, Kella was having a blast creating his new map, which reminded him of the Dungeoncraft game he had loved so much in his previous life. For him, map making was the best way to focus and have fun. It was something he'd always been really passionate about. Suddenly, the door was kicked wide open, and the Demon King stormed in, furious to find out his son had made a secret office right under his nose. Kella barely had a moment to react before his father's fist went straight through his stomach with brutal force. The king said that if Kella truly wanted to help, he shouldn't hide things, but Kella could barely respond, just spitting up blood as he fought to stay conscious. He thought that the pain he was feeling now was way more intense than anything his brothers had ever dished out, and he honestly believed he might actually die this time. But then, still bleeding, Kella held the map out to his father and explained that he was mapping out the entire region surrounding the castle, marking all the weak points and the spots most vulnerable to enemy guild attacks. He said he was drawing the area's geography in detail to help them in future battles. The Demon King looked down at the map and slowly pulled his fist out of Kella's body, letting him finally breathe a little. He then asked why Kella had done all of this in secret. Kella explained that if he had revealed the plan before finishing it, he was afraid his father wouldn't have allowed it. So, he decided to present the map only after it was complete. because as the son of the Demon King, he wanted to help completely destroy the Celestial Guild. The two of them stared at each other intensely for a few seconds, while Ren, who was watching the whole thing, could hardly believe Kella was talking to his own father that way. The Demon King then asked how long it would take him to finish the plan, leaving Kella surprised by the direct question. Despite his injury, Kella replied that 5 would be enough. The king asked if he meant 5 days, and Kella, still panting, clarified that he didn't mean 5 days, but just 5 hours, a statement that completely puzzled the Demon King. Kella insisted that in that time, they could complete all the construction needed for both defense and a counterattack. He even volunteered to personally lead the entire operation. The Demon King stared at his son, totally amazed, finding it hard to believe this determined young man was really his heir. He agreed, saying the plan sounded great, but warned that if Kella was just feeding him empty words to impress him, he would tear the map to shreds and then his son would be next. Kella replied that he understood perfectly, thinking to himself that he'd finally managed to prove his worth, even as he was coughing up blood and seriously wondering if his dad was actually trying to send him to an early grave. Ren, on the other hand, was just thinking about how Kella had successfully won over the Demon King, which made her even more captivated by him. Then she snapped back to reality, remembering she had to rush him to the infirmary. Later on, after recovering a bit, Kella managed to finish the map in just 5 hours, exactly as he'd promised. The forces of the demonic castle immediately sprang into action, with mages conjuring magical illusion barriers around the construction areas so the enemy guilds wouldn't suspect a thing. They also started to alter the very geography of the surrounding land, using magic to reshape everything according to Kella's new blueprint. He thought to himself that with his new map, designed just like it was in a game, his master plan was finally falling into place. Meanwhile, over at the Celestial Guild's camp, the guild master, Merson, was completely floored when he received an urgent message. He demanded to know if the demons were truly reshaping the terrain around the castle, and one of his subordinates confirmed it. The subordinate reported that the enemy had discovered and activated some kind of illusion spell. Emerson grew concerned, as he had no idea what those demons were capable of with that type of magic. The messenger then asked if they should attack immediately to disrupt the plan, but Emerson shot the idea down, believing these enemy tactics would ultimately be useless. He explained that in only 3 days, the guild's most powerful squadron would be fully assembled and ready to mobilize, as Talon's squadron was already on its way. Talon had started putting this elite squad together about 12 years ago, and now, the roster was finally complete. Emerson declared with absolute confidence that this squad was unbeatable and guaranteed that this time, the Demon King was going down for good. According to his math, Talon would arrive at the castle in 2 days, and the knights with him were dead set on taking out the Demon King and ending his bloodline's reign for good. They were ready to burn the castle to the ground and wipe out everyone inside. Among the squadron members, a red-haired woman watched General Killman arrive and commented on his showy entrance. Her name was Commander Shreels, and when a knight asked if they could actually win this time, she replied with unwavering conviction that they could. Shreels declared that Talon's squadron was on a completely different level from the other guilds and that they were 100% certain they would finish the Demon King this time, no doubt about it. At that very moment, the Demon King himself was sitting on his throne, mulling over the map his son had created. He concluded that Kella wasn't bluffing after all, because the plan was actually solid. Although the map wasn't flawless, he was surprised by the sheer effort his son had put into it, and he recognized that Kella had pushed his body to its absolute limit to get it done on time. The king knew he couldn't act rashly, so he decided to bide his time and wait for the perfect opportunity. The next day would be the final day before the guild's big offensive, and he knew he had to bring the war against the Celestials to an end. At that moment, the demon mages and construction crews were working around the clock, reshaping the land and finalizing all the preparations. Kella watched the progress, pleased that everything was going exactly as he had envisioned. To him, this was far more thrilling than just designing game maps, because now he was able to actually mold the real world to his liking. His only job now was to wait for the battle to finally kick off. And then, at long last, the big day arrived. On the field of the Celestial Guild, Talon was fully assembled with his entire squad and stood before Hermerson, declaring that the time had come to take down the Demon King. Hermerson immediately gave the order to advance, fully believing they were poised for a total victory. Talon was fired up and ready for a fight, but suddenly, something came crashing down from the sky right in front of his group. At first, it just looked like a tiny, twinkling speck of magic light that popped into existence. The commander quickly figured out it was a trap, but, welp, a little too late for that. Then, bam, a massive explosion went off right in their faces, catching everyone in the blast. But despite the crazy intense attack, both sides were super quick on their feet and managed to react just in time. So, believe it or not, nobody got hurt. But what seemed like a simple boom was actually the Demon King himself making a grand entrance, right in front of the whole crowd. So, rewind a few hours. The king was getting the rundown from his son, Kella, who explained that he'd managed to switch off an ancient magical barrier that was basically a magic blocker for the entire demon territory. And now, with that barrier down, the Demon King could zip around with his teleportation powers whenever he wanted, completely off the enemy's radar. When the king asked if he could just pop right into the enemy camp, Caldera was like, "Are you crazy? That's basically jumping into the lion's den all by yourself." Tarm also chimed in, saying it was way too risky, even for a powerhouse like him. Then, of course, someone else in the room, Hell, piped up and asked if they were seriously doubting the Demon King's strength, and you bet they both backpedaled immediately, saying, no, that's not it. Their main worry was just that he wasn't fully healed up from his last battle. But even with all that, the king just told everyone to zip it, saying his mind was made up. And that brings us back to the present moment, where the Demon King was standing right in front of the Heavenly Guild squad with one simple goal, to wipe them all out. He'd gathered a ridiculous amount of mana around him, so much that the pressure in the air was just crushing. It was so intense that even the toughest warriors started to sweat and back away. But even so, Talcan didn't even flinch. He was totally set on taking the Demon King down, and his buddies, filled with newfound courage, charged forward with him. But man, the king's power was on a whole other level. The second the fight started, the whole battlefield just erupted into pure chaos and destruction. Meanwhile, Kella was way up on top of the demon castle tower, keeping a close eye on everything and getting the rest of the forces ready. He announced that all their preps were done and gave the order for the army to charge the enemy guild. Right away, all the troops took off, heading straight for the center of the action where the Demon King was already throwing down with the enemy. As part of their master ambush plan, monstrous creatures started bursting out from underground, attacking the Heavenly Guild warriors from every single direction. This totally made Kella think everything was going exactly as planned, and hey, that was awesome. But then, sneaking up behind him were Caldera and Tarm. Caldera, in a super chilly tone, said she still couldn't figure out how Kella pulled all this off, but then added that things weren't quite going the way he thought they were. Tarm, standing right beside him, added that unfortunately, Kella had gotten a little too big for his britches, and it was time for him to go. Kella clearly did not see this betrayal coming, and before he could even blink, Tarm slammed his weapon right into his gut, telling Caldera that now was the perfect time to finish the job. Without a moment's hesitation, Caldera dashed in and, with one clean swing, sent Kella's head flying. The two of them actually laughed as they watched his body drop. They commented that without a head, even Kella's famous regeneration powers wouldn't do him any good. As his head got tossed to the ground, Kella's last thought was something like, "Well, I guess this is really the end of the line for me." His body hit the floor hard, and his head rolled right to the edge of the tower. Caldera then walked over and remarked that they'd finally gotten rid of that troublesome guy. Tarm said it was time for them to go help their dad on the front lines. But then, plot twist, Caldera went and betrayed her own brother, stabbing him in the back with a hidden dagger. Tarm, even though he was hurt, didn't go down right away and realized Caldera was using one of their mother's forbidden weapons, something neither of them was ever supposed to touch. Caldera just shot back that she's a demon and doesn't do rules, because hey, weapons are meant to be used. Tarm asked if she was really this serious about it, and Caldera said that if she took him out right then and there, she'd become the one and only successor to the throne. Absolutely furious, Tarm charged at her, and Caldera swore she'd make it quick for him. And just like that, the two of them started a crazy, violent fight right there on top of the tower. Meanwhile, Kella was somehow still conscious, just in total disbelief, wondering how his own kind could be so ruthless, betraying and turning on each other without a second thought. He'd never in a million years imagined his story would end this way. But just then, the ground under him cracked open and up popped Ren from a secret tunnel, shaking but totally determined. She scooped up Kella's head and started sticking it back onto his body, trying her best not to freak out. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, demon portals were opening up everywhere, and their perfectly timed attacks made it super obvious the demons already knew the humans' playbook. The Celestial Guild was getting absolutely wrecked and had no idea how to handle this flood of monsters and enemy magic. That's when the talking dragon came barreling out with a huge roar, blasting everything in its way with pure fire and rage, and zoomed right at the Demon King for a massive strike. But the king didn't even flinch. He just shot up into the air to meet the dragon, grabbed its neck, and just popped its head clean off in one smooth move, before tossing the dragon's body to the ground like it was a piece of trash. The commander of the Talcan squad saw this insane scene and, totally horrified, screamed for everyone to open fire on the Demon King right away. But while they were scrambling to get an attack together, the demon army just kept on marching. And right there, in the middle of them was Hell, just chilling out calmly, watching the whole spectacle with his arms crossed. The commander asked if they'd landed a hit on Hell, but it didn't take long to see that something was way off. Hell's body started to change right before their very eyes, shifting into a super intimidating and scary new shape. Yep, he was powering up into his strongest form. The members of the Celestial Guild were pretty much frozen stiff with fear, and the commander muttered that this was just like the old books said it would be. Shriels confirmed it, adding that this was, in fact, the Demon King's final form. Even with Shriels yelling at them to keep it together and not get scared, it was plain to see that the warriors were totally rattled. The Demon King's insane aura was pressing down on everyone, and even Commander Talcon could hardly budge, whether from fear or just the crushing weight of all that wicked energy. The Demon King looked around and thought to himself that Kella's plan really only had one tiny flaw. He gathered all their forces, smack dab in the middle of the enemy's home base, which meant there was no easy way out. Still, it's not like that was going to make him chicken out, because hey, he's the Demon King, and being cornered wasn't something he worried about. Turns out, Kella had already planned for this. Not that Hell cared about that little detail right now, though. What really mattered at this moment was taking out all the humans. So, Hell started to pull in even more mana around himself, creating an energy so thick you could practically feel it from miles away. The seriously injured commander of the Talcon squad yelled that he was about to unleash his final form and that everyone needed to be ready to sacrifice themselves, since it was their only shot to stop the Demon King from completely wiping out the guild. When Hell finally went full power with his final form, the energy blasting from him was so massive you could see it from over the horizon, way past the Demon Castle walls. Meanwhile, back in the underground tunnels, Ren was still frantically trying to stick Kella's head back on his body. She was shaking and had tears in her eyes, and she just kept whispering that it had to work, practically begging. It reminded her of that one time Kella's arm got torn off. And even though she was grossed out and terrified, she did exactly what he said and just put it back on. And what do you know? To her total surprise, his arm healed up perfectly a little while later. Now, the challenge was way bigger, since she had to see if the same trick would work on his head. Ren hesitated for a second, thinking that this was probably a lot more dangerous, but she went ahead with it carefully, still totally scared. After a few tense moments, the experiment worked, and his body started to show signs of life. With that, Kella wasted no time putting his plan in motion. He told Ren to go find Caldera's servant and give her a very specific message he prepared. A little later, Ren found Caldera's servant and, just like Kella told her too, said that Kella was planning to take out Caldera during the battle, using the moment the Demon King was distracted with the guild's warriors. Caldera's servant was shocked and asked how he was possibly going to pull that off, and Ren explained that this would be the perfect opportunity for Caldera to be the one to chop off Kella's head, because that would be a surefire way to finish him, since his healing powers don't work if his head gets disconnected from his body. As Ren looked at Kella's motionless body with his head freshly reattached, she couldn't help but shiver, thinking that everything was going exactly according to Kella's crazy plan. But she was still terrified that he was actually gone for good. Just then, Kella's eyes snapped open, and with a super annoyed look, he asked who she was calling an idiot. Ren was completely stunned to see him awake. She really hadn't expected him to pull through this time. She realized his regeneration took a major hit from mana-infused weapons like Cella's dagger, but right now, that didn't even matter. What was important was that he was alive and their plan was still a go. Ren was so emotional she ran over and gave him a huge hug, telling him she seriously thought he was a goner. Kella was caught completely off guard, turning bright red, and having no idea why she was doing that. He awkwardly pushed her away and said that since he survived, they were moving forward with the plan. At that moment, he started to dissolve the contract between them, freeing her from her duties as a servant. Ren was totally shocked by this, since she was now free to live her life however she wanted. But even so, she decided to stick with him. She remembered when they were kids, how she'd promised that one day she would be his friend, not just a servant. That memory made Ren even more emotional, and despite her new freedom, she declared she wanted to stay by Kella's side, saying she'd go anywhere as long as he didn't leave her behind. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Tolkien's commander was in terrible shape, covered head to toe in cuts and burns. He watched the Demon King, standing there even with one arm missing, still fighting on like some unstoppable force of nature. For the commander, this was the real deal, a walking catastrophe that no human could ever contain, no matter how clever their plans. He just stood there silently, taking in the battlefield, and realized nearly all the enemies were already down. At the same time, it hit him that none of his own soldiers were around anymore, either. The battle had reached its breaking point, with both sides completely wiped out, and now everything rested on the few who were left standing. His thoughts drifted to his children, and he worried that they weren't going to make it in time. But he quickly pushed that thought away, realizing this had always been his fight to finish. He decided he would use every last bit of mana in his body to fight to the very end. Meanwhile, Kella was dashing towards what he thought was an exit, thinking he could finally escape the castle and be free. However, Ren suddenly threw up a magic shield to block an attack headed right for them, explaining that she could smell trouble because mages were hiding in the walls. And those mages were there because they already knew the Demon King's kids would try to make a run for it, so they'd set up an ambush to stop any escape attempt. Kella was completely floored that they knew about the secret passage and couldn't figure out how they possibly could have discovered it. But the mages made it clear they had no intention of letting any of the Demon King's family escape alive. So, they started firing spells in their direction. Ren jumped in front to block the attacks, saying she would hold them off alone while Kella escaped. But he shot back that there was no way she could handle it by herself, knowing she could only use basic defense magic and was basically useless with offensive spells. Even so, she kept fighting. It was then Kella understood that Ren was ready to sacrifice herself just to protect him. Kella, fed up with the situation, refused to run. He forcefully shoved Ren out of harm's way so she wouldn't get killed, telling her that if she really wanted to follow him, she had better not die in front of him, because that would only make him even more ticked off. The mages just laughed at his tough guy act, saying he was trapped now. They mocked him, saying a simple mid-level spell would be enough to finish him off since he was known for being the weakest person in the demon realm. But Kella thought to himself that his body had always been timid, that it had never unleashed its true powers or shown its real strength. So, he decided right then and there that it was time to prove everyone wrong. And just like that, he effortlessly blocked their magic with his own mana. Ren's jaw dropped at how much power he had, and even the mages from the Celestial Guild were totally stunned. Kella then zipped towards the first mage, brutally slammed his head into the ground, and then overwhelmed him with his mana, asking if they still thought he was weak. They had some bad info and were about to go confirm their sources in the great beyond. The mage couldn't even gasp for air before his head was completely obliterated by the magical blast, erasing him from existence. Ren just watched, completely stunned that Kella was taking down mages from the Celestial Guild using nothing but his own mana. All the while, the other mages were freaking out, yelling that it was impossible since all their intel said Kella had absolutely zero combat ability. Well, Kella was busy proving just how wrong all that intel was. So, the mages left standing figured they had to go all in with some high-class magic. They decided to cast the Spear of Light spell. Knowing it was a huge gamble that would use up all their mana at once if they failed, it was game over for both of them. Still, the two of them cast the spell together. Ren, who was already running on fumes, knew she couldn't possibly block an attack that powerful. In the next instant, Kella was pierced by two spears of light, but Ren had managed to shield him from one by taking the hit herself, even though she was now impaled and couldn't move. She whispered an apology to her master, sorry that she couldn't protect him until the very end. The wizard just gloated that the plan was a success and that this was the end of the line for them. One of them even had the nerve to suggest that as a reward, they could have some fun with Ren, calling her a little beauty. But even with his spear sticking out of her, she told that creep to get lost because she knew all too well what humans did to demons they captured. The wizard just laughed it off, saying he'd get his fun with her soon enough. All Kella could think about was how, even in this world, people treated others like they were just things to be used. The mage then announced that before anything else, he was going to finish off the Demon King's kid. And Kella, who was fading fast, thought about how the castle exit was right there, so close, and that this was probably how he was going to check out. Just when all hope seemed lost, Ren screamed his name. And in that moment, Kella felt a bizarre sensation, like an immense force was zeroing in on him. Then, an image of his father, the Demon King Hellcin, appeared right before his eyes. Totally confused, he wondered if the fight was over and if his dad's master plan had failed. But then he heard his father's voice, explaining that he had already fought this battle countless times in his mind, weighing every single possibility and seeing all possible futures, all to get to this exact moment. Kella had no clue what he was talking about. So, Hell laid it out for him. Caldera had no compassion for her fellow demons, so she could never be queen. And Tarm had zero ambition to be king. So, even if it was only for a little while, he was certain that his son, Kella, was the absolute best choice to carry on the family legacy. Kella tried to argue, thinking this was a massive mistake, but it was too late. As his final act, Hell transferred every last bit of mana he had into Kella, revealing a secret ability. Turns out, the Demon King could pass down his power to his own bloodline right before he passed away. Kella was in total shock, asking his dad what on earth he was doing. But Hell simply thought that his son shouldn't mourn for him. Instead, he needed to act like a true demon and take on the world without a second thought. Back on the battlefield, all that was left of the once mighty Demon King was his head, lying among the ruins, marking the end of an era. General Killman had already given his life in the battle, leaving only Commander Seals and a handful of human soldiers. When they finally saw that the Demon King was dead, the humans erupted in celebration, thinking victory was finally theirs. However, at that very moment, Kella's body was hit with the full force of the mana he inherited from his father. The power surge was so violent that the spears of light piercing through his and Ren's bodies started to crack and shatter into pieces. She asked what was happening, while the mages looked on in total horror, unable to figure out how his power level had just skyrocketed out of nowhere. Kella could only wonder if his father was really gone, but he quickly understood that his dad's plan had worked perfectly right up to the very end. The mages, completely out of mana, realized they were in big trouble and started thinking about bailing. But Kella just told Ren to get clear. He could feel it now, the pure darkness that had belonged to his father, a power so intense it felt like it could devour everything around him. The mages screamed at him to stay back, calling him a demon, and that word instantly reminded Kella of the vile things they'd said to Ren just moments before. Completely enraged, he shot forward and threw a single punch, so incredibly powerful that it vaporized both mages at the same time, crushing them in an instant, and it dawned on him that the humans were the ones who looked like the real demons. Ren was completely floored by the scene, finally understanding the true power of the Demon King. But Kella could feel that his body couldn't handle that much energy for long. He asked Ren if she was able to walk, and even though she was hurt, she said yes, calling him her young master. At that, Kella announced it was time for them to get out of there. He figured that thanks to his father's sacrifice, he'd finally managed to escape that awful castle. Then, Kella found himself standing in the middle of a beautiful, green field. For a split second, he actually believed he was free. He dreamed that now he could go anywhere he wanted, live however he wished, and finally build a life of his own. But suddenly, a strange magic began to swirl around his body. Ren instantly recognized it as a teleportation spell, and Kella, without missing a beat, told her to grab his hands so they could stick together. In the next moment, they were both teleported away. They came crashing down like a comet into a far-off realm, a gorgeous and totally different place from where they had been. Kella was wondering where in the world they had ended up, while Ren, amazed by the view, remarked that she never knew he could cast teleportation spells. But Kella quickly explained that it wasn't his doing. It felt more like an emergency escape spell, something that had been set up ahead of time, most likely by his father, as an automatic safety measure to protect his kids in case he died. It was only then that Ren noticed her own wounds were completely healed. She guessed that about 3 days must have passed while they were unconscious, concluding it was a spell that combined teleportation with healing to save their lives. Ren realized with a thoughtful expression that their father had actually done it because he was worried. He really did care about his own children. Ren then asked if the Demon King was really gone, and Kella confirmed he was. He thought to himself that everything had gone exactly according to his father's plan. Ren then declared that he should become the next Demon King, but Kella was just confused, asking why on earth he would do that. Ren went on to explain that she'd noticed a change in him, something that made him the ideal successor. So from that point on, she would serve him faithfully until he claimed his title. Kella just thought she had the wrong idea, especially since he didn't have any powers right now. But suddenly, Ren let out a gasp. She had just realized they were in the magical country of Arsol, a land famous for gathering the most talented humans trained to hunt and eliminate demons. They spotted a massive banner celebrating the death of the Demon King, put up by the people of Talua. Kella couldn't help but wonder why, out of all possible places, they were sent here. He knew they'd be in serious danger if anyone found them out. But then Ren remembered she could use a transformation spell to make them both look human. Kella agreed it was a great idea, since she was clearly the expert with that kind of magic. He then asked Ren to fill him in on everything she knew about their new location. Ren explained that Arsol was a small island nation located to the east of Tulua. It's a land blessed by a legendary creature, the giant cryptid called Watergore, who lives in the nearby seas and has made the country's magical growth incredibly strong. As a result, the most powerful mages on the entire continent are born there, and for centuries, they have been the natural enemies of all demons. However, despite all that strength, Arsol was still under the political control of Tulua. Kella was baffled as to why his father would send him to such a dangerous place, but Ren reminded him that they were in the capital and needed to find a way out as soon as possible. Kella replied that a proper escape takes preparation, as she well knew. He figured that to achieve his dream in this world, he'd have to master magic, because in this country, everything ran on it. From the simplest buildings to the most advanced structures, every last thing was powered by spells. Even Talua's society depended on magic to function. Kella started to believe that this place, as risky as it was, could also be where he'd learn everything he needed to change his own destiny. Kella even thought that by being here, he might be able to create new dungeons, just like in the game. But suddenly, his grand plans were interrupted by an incredibly loud growl from Ren's stomach. She sheepishly said that maybe they should grab a bite to eat. A little while later, Ren was happily chowing down on a magical meal famous in Arsol, telling him over and over again just how delicious it was. Ren was so thrilled she ordered a second helping, declaring it was even more delicious than the first. Kella couldn't help but think that for someone who was just complaining, Ren was now having a little too much fun. She then suggested they hit up a nearby bar, and he was totally on board. When they got there, they walked right into a massive party. It turned out everyone was celebrating the defeat of the Demon King. The whole bash was led by Shreels, the commander of Talcon's army, and pretty much everyone was already wasted. Naturally, Ren and Kella were right in the middle of it, faking their best party faces to blend in. They started drinking along with the crowd, doing their best to fly under the radar. Kella was actually thinking a little break like this wasn't half bad. Unfortunately, Shreels had already spotted them and seemed to find the pair quite intriguing. A little while later, Kella was paying the price, hunched over in an alley while Ren laughed, telling him he clearly got a bit too carried away. Ren teased that he obviously couldn't handle his liquor, and how ironic it was they were celebrating his own father's demise. Kella shot back that she was the one who started downing drinks first, but just then, the party atmosphere vanished. People suddenly started rushing through the streets, yelling that a brand new S-rank mission had just been posted. This was a huge deal. Everyone was floored because up until now, the Demon King was the one and only S-rank mission that had ever existed. For another one to pop up out of nowhere was just unheard of. Ren grabbed Kella, insisting they had to go see what was going on. They pushed through a crowd gathered around the new poster, and both of their jaws dropped when they saw Kella's face staring back at them as the new target. He was officially named as the Demon King's son, the last target that had to be eliminated for good. Kella was about to blurt out, "Why me?" But Ren slapped a hand over his mouth just in time. She quickly played it off, telling everyone he was just a little too drunk. Some of the onlookers were already scoffing, saying he was the weakest of the Demon King's kids and that this mission felt more like a B rank, not S rank. They figured taking him down would be a piece of cake. Kella realized that laying low here was about to get a whole lot harder. As he and Ren quickly walked away, she almost let his real name slip out. Ren quickly asked what she was supposed to call him in public now. Kella had to think fast and came up with the name Shuo. Ren immediately said it was a terrible name and demanded to know where he pulled it from, but Kella just told her to zip it and deal with it. Ren then muttered she was surprised they found out he was still alive so fast. Kella agreed, saying their new plan was simple: grab what they came for and get out of the country as soon as possible. But as they tried to slip away unnoticed, they saw a woman watching them from the middle of the road. It was Shreels, and she stepped right in their path, asking if the rumors about a new S-rank mission were true. Kella just nodded nervously, while Ren quickly chimed in that they were just checking out the poster because they were curious. Kella recalled hearing people in the bar call Shreels the hope of our soul, which meant she had to be seriously powerful. Shreels then asked if the Demon King's son was actually alive, grumbling that demons never seem to stay down for good. Kella had a strong feeling she was talking about him, but he did his best to keep a straight face. Ren tried to play it cool, remarking that this son probably wasn't even that tough and taking him out shouldn't be a big deal. But then, all of a sudden, Shreels slung her arms around both of their shoulders, getting uncomfortably close. She asked if they really thought capturing this target would be a problem, even for the son of the Demon King. Shreels revealed that she'd had her eye on them for a while, adding that they had a really weird smell. Then she got right to the point, asking if there was more to them than meets the eye. In that instant, Kella and Ren both went completely stiff, sure that their cover was blown, but then Shreels just burst out laughing. She said they were probably just a couple of travelers who hadn't bathed in days. She even asked why they were so smelly, and the two of them, still totally on edge, just awkwardly agreed that yeah, that was it exactly. They just really needed a shower. Kella figured they were in the clear, at least for now. A little later, he was kicking back in a hot tub at a fancy inn, a tray loaded with sweets right by his side. While munching away, he wondered if this food was magical, too. He mused that he'd always dreamed of living inside a game world, and now, it looked like his dream had actually come true. He had to admit, this little moment of peace wasn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, Ren was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. She knew if her identity was revealed, it would be game over right then and there. And why was she so terrified? Because she was sharing a bath with Shreels herself. The commander asked how she was enjoying the bath, and Ren let out a nervous laugh, saying, "Oh, it's great, of course." Shreels picked up on her tension, remarking that she looked like a demon on the verge of being captured. Ren, trying to play it cool, just replied sarcastically, "Yeah, can you imagine?" Thinking Ren just needed to loosen up, Shreels cast a holy spell to help her relax. Internally, Ren was freaking out, because holy magic was pretty much the worst thing you could use on a demon. That kind of magic could completely shatter her transformation spell. While struggling to keep her disguise up, she desperately prayed her master would come and save her. But Kella, he was on the other side of the wall, chilling in another hot tub and sipping tea without a care in the world. Shreels let out a relaxed sigh, telling Ren that after the Demon King's defeat, She felt like her whole life's work had finally paid off. Meanwhile, Ren was just screaming internally for her to please shut up so she could get out of there. As Shriels started rambling on about being chosen as a mage at birth, Ren saw her chance to make a break for it. She cut her off, claiming she really had to use the restroom and would be right back. But before Shriels let her go, Shriels slyly commented that Ren probably wasn't a big fan of the sacred aroma. A little later, Ren finally found Kella and just unloaded on him about how awful that was. Kella, however, just mentioned how much more relaxed he felt after his bath. Ren shot back that this was hardly the time to be enjoying a nice soak when her disguise was almost completely blown. Kella looked surprised, asking what she meant. Ren had to spell it out for him. Shriels used a sacred scent that could literally drain a demon's mana. It was an advanced human magic that could have exposed her true form in a second. Kella admitted that, yeah, that could have been bad. But then he said he was just gonna hop in for another quick shower before they took off. An exasperated Ren insisted they had to leave right now. And of course, right on cue, Shriels showed up asking if they were already leaving. Ren, forcing a smile to keep up the act, said she'd love another dip in the bath with her, but regretfully, it was really time for them to go. Shriels insisted they couldn't possibly leave yet, saying they absolutely had to try the kingdom's magical food and drinks first. She cheered, practically dragging Kella along with her, while Ren's patience was wearing dangerously thin. Elsewhere, a squad of magicians was assembling. Their instruments had detected a demonic presence inside the house, and not just any demon, but the son of the Demon King himself. They declared this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that they had to capture the fiend immediately. As the mages prepared to launch their attack, Kella, Ren, and Shriels were trying out some seriously enchanted food. When Shriels casually mentioned that their drinks were made with sacred water, they all agreed it tasted amazing, with Kella adding that it was out of this world good. But as he kept sipping, he started to feel like his insides were on fire. He'd gotten so caught up in the delicious magic food that he totally forgot it might come with some wild side effects. It turns out the holy water was having a major disagreement with his demonic nature. That's when Shriels decided to pick up the conversation they'd started back in the bathtub. She explained that her entire life had been laser-focused on one thing, taking down the Demon King. She said she joined the talking squad and trained like a maniac for years on end. She even told them she got a gnarly scar during one of the intense tryouts just to get into the unit. Ren, completely surprised, admitted she hadn't even seen the scar, to which Shriels replied, "Oh, you think that's bad? I've got a worse one on my face." She then coolly pushed her hair back, revealing a huge scar over her right eye, and adding that the eye itself was long gone. Naturally, everyone's jaws just about hit the floor. Shriels explained that she uses a bit of magic to cover up the scars because every time she sees them, it's a harsh reminder. It brings back all the pain from the ridiculously tough days she had to push through. She went on to say that to get into the talking squad, you couldn't just be good. Applicants had to prove they were the absolute best of the best. It was the only shot anyone had at actually defeating the Demon King. They had to suck up the pain and push way past their limits. They had to show everyone that this was the one goal they wanted more than anything. Shriels then declared that she had dedicated her whole life to the singular mission of killing the Demon King. She then stared down the other two and asked what exactly they'd been up to this whole time. She got right in Kella's face and pointed out that he looked like he had some battle scars too. But when she lifted his shirt to check, there was nothing there. She was stunned, saying his skin was so ridiculously smooth he looked like he'd never even seen a fight, let alone gotten a scratch. Ren started to freak out a little inside, knowing that such a gentle and close touch could totally shatter the disguise spell that was hiding Kella's real form. Then Shriels, with a much more intense look, flat out asked him if he was a demon. In that instant, Ren couldn't help but wonder if she'd known the truth all along. Before they could even react, a bunch of rats scurried out around them and, in a flash, transformed into wizards. Even Shriels looked completely surprised by this. Both Kella and Ren immediately knew they'd walked right into a trap and were wondering how they got found out. But Shriels, with a smirk on her face, mentioned that the mage's visit was a genuine surprise. The mages then confirmed the guild's intel was correct, revealing that Shriels was the one who had been in disguise this whole time. She was actually a traitor who had infiltrated their ranks. There was no way Kella or Ren could have ever seen this coming. Kella started to piece it together, thinking that the mages weren't after him at all, but Shriels. And his hunch was confirmed when she admitted, "Yep, you got it," and said there was no point in hiding anymore. In fact, she was the one who had leaked her own identity. The mages, now having all the confirmation they needed, announced they had her confession and were moving in to eliminate her. But Shriels didn't even flinch. She declared that she was an elite mage from the Tulkun squad and that a small group of Errol's mages stood no chance against her. Meanwhile, Ren was urgently telling Kella that they needed to bolt out of there, like, right now. And Kella was just thinking about how this situation had snowballed into something way bigger than they ever imagined. Just then, a massive magical explosion rocked the entire area. Ren could hardly believe the sheer power Shrills possessed, as she had wiped out everything with just one spell. Kella wondered if maybe she had protected them on purpose. He got his answer pretty quickly, when Shrills revealed that she had always known they were demons. There was no fooling her, she said, because she was a demon, too. With a determined look, Shrills introduced herself as Shrills Hellcin, daughter of the Demon King Hellcin himself. Kella and Ren were absolutely floored, completely, unable to believe what they were hearing. But Shrills said there wasn't time for a long-winded explanation, so she decided to just show them the truth with memory transfer magic. She explained that she was born as part of an experiment. After tons of failures, she was the very first successful one, a demon who could hide her horns with her own demonic power. Kella was just in awe, realizing he was standing right in front of the Demon King's own daughter. And in her memory, the king himself declared that his own blood flowed through her veins, confirming Shrills as his heir. Shrills reflected on everything she had been through since she was born. For her, every single day had been a living nightmare. She endured agonizing experiments, watched so many others perish, and always thought she'd end up just like them. But she managed to survive, and now she finally understood it was all for a reason. She was the daughter of the Demon King. She proudly declared it was an honor to serve her lord, and the king replied that he would grant her a name worthy of her. He named her Shrills Kaldun and announced that she would become a spy, infiltrating the human kingdom to bring information directly back to him. Shrills thought that, as the Demon King's daughter, she could accomplish anything. Soon after, she snuck into the human kingdom, pretending she'd been captured by demons. Everyone felt sorry for her and warmly welcomed her into Arl. And that's how her life as a spy for the Demon King began. As time went on, she mastered Arsel's magic and grew into an incredibly powerful mage. She pushed through every hardship, overcame every single challenge, and eventually worked her way up to become the top member of the Tolkien Squadron, Arsel's elite force. After 15 long years, she finally had the chance to see her father again. All she wanted was to run to him and hug him, but she knew the time wasn't right just yet. She felt the perfect moment was just around the corner. Her mission was to secretly use her magic to help her father take out Killman, clear the battlefield of all their enemies, and once the coast was clear, she would return to the castle with him. Shrills' dream was simply to live by her father's side as her true self, Shrills Hellcin. However, things didn't go at all like they'd planned. Killman declared that the Demon King was even more incredible than he'd imagined, calling him the strongest opponent he'd ever had the honor to face. But the king just scoffed, saying he didn't need any compliments from a pathetic human like him. Furious, Killman yelled that the king's arrogance would be his downfall, and then, he unleashed his ultimate attack. It was the Spear of Heaven versus the Demon King's final gambit, the Flames of Hell. The magical clash was so huge, Shrills could barely even process what was happening. Then, right in the middle of that massive explosion, Shrills heard her father's voice in her head, speaking directly to her demon self, Dune. He told her she was in charge now, and that her new mission was to guide the next Demon King, protecting him to the very end, just as she had always protected him. And just like that, the battle was over, and the Demon King was gone. A completely shaken Shrills had to watch her own father die, totally helpless. After that whole ordeal, she had to go back to Tulua and put on a brave face, pretending to mourn with everybody for the man who was secretly her dad. After that awkward ceremony, she quit her position and went back to Arsol, which was basically her second home, the place where this whole adventure started. She tried to settle back in, but she really only had one goal in mind, to one day get payback for her father's death. She announced that her grand plan was to take down Arsol first. Ren, still trying to wrap his head around everything, asked, "Wait, so your times really times the Demon King's daughter?" Kella, on the other hand, felt like this was all a total nightmare. He figured he was finally done with siblings, even if they weren't blood-related. He never in a million years imagined a new sister would just pop up out of the blue. Shrills made it super clear that she wasn't going to force them to join her demon squad, but she needed them to understand one little thing. Arsol was basically the most magically supercharged country in the world. The longer they stayed, the slimmer the chances were for the demon race. She pointed out that Kella would be a goner if he stuck around there too long. Kella had to admit she had a point. I mean, even in video games, mages are always the heaviest hitters in any army. And at that moment, the person with the biggest target on his back in all of Arsol was him. Just outside, the mages were saying they totally heard that explosion. They declared that the trio wouldn't get away with it, and that they'd pour every last drop of mana they had into taking them out. Kella was ticked off, thinking that these mages still saw him as just a regular human, yet they were ready to attack him without a second thought. That's when he started to change back into his full demon form. Ren was absolutely stunned, but Kella just said it was for self-defense. Shrills, however, was even more floored to feel the energy pouring off of him. It was the exact same energy as their father, the Demon King. And so, that very night, What looked to Ren like an endless battle was about to begin. But in reality, it was more like a one-sided beatdown, because that's exactly what it was. For Shrills, using Arcel as their playground was like fighting with a home field advantage. She knew her way around just by feeling the ground with her hand. Unfortunately for the humans, they had to watch as all their important buildings got wrecked, including the government offices and the Magic Academy. Kella himself used the Demon King's mana to easily overpower the humans, who were all a bit out of it and vulnerable from the festival. With this kind of teamwork, the magical land of Arcel was completely wiped off the map, with absolutely nothing and no one left standing. When it was all over, even the sky itself seemed to be on fire. One of the mages even managed to shout that Arcel would never fall so easily and that he'd never forgive those darn demons. But then, he too got toasted by Shrills. She said that was her line, actually, because she was the one who couldn't forgive the humans, and she was starting with Arcel. Next, she toppled Taliesin, and finally, she would bring down the entire Talon Empire, wiping every last one of them out. Ren thought that sounded totally impossible, and Kella replied that they had helped each other out enough for one night, and now, it was time for them to part ways. But Shrills told him to hold on. She looked him in the eye and asked if he really thought she wouldn't recognize that power. You said you were called Dune, the Demon King's second son, didn't you? Kella figured the cat was out of the bag, so he just gave a nod to confirm that, yep, it was him. Shrills was shocked, asking if it was for real, since she was just taking a wild guess, and he actually confirmed it. She'd only had a hunch, but now she knew for sure. She then explained that, technically speaking, she wasn't the Demon King's daughter, but more of a special being created from his blood aura. Because of that, she could recognize anyone with the same blood, and since she was created after Kella was born, that technically made him her older brother. She then said she figured he probably wanted revenge for their father too, so they should totally stick together, not split up. Kella thought to himself that while revenge was definitely on his to-do list, his biggest desire was just to get away from all this. Shrills wondered if he was seriously planning to bail, considering he was the last direct heir of the Demon King, his only remaining kid. Ren figured it was probably smarter to just go along with her, because if they didn't, she might actually decide to end them. Kella quickly chimed in that of course he wanted revenge, realizing he was pretty much stuck agreeing with her for now. Hearing this, Shrills got super excited and suggested they could all hit the road together, leaving a trail of fire and destruction wherever they went. Kella thought to himself that he needed to learn Arcel's magic one way or another, and at the moment, the only person around who could teach him was Shrills. So, Kella decided he'd stick by Shrills' side for a little while, using revenge as his cover story. And in the meantime, he'd just have to treat her like a teammate. As they walked off, a human mage who had somehow survived the battle watched them leave, thinking he absolutely had to report this mess to the kingdom of Tulua. A little while later in Tulua, an emergency message was rushed directly to the king, interrupting his fancy banquet. The king demanded to know what was so important. The messenger explained that Shrills from the Tan Squadron was secretly a demon and that Arcel had tried to take her out. But then, the messenger added, Kalakan, the Demon King's last son, showed up out of nowhere and helped her completely obliterate Arcel. The king was totally shocked and sputtered, wait, the Demon King's son took out Arcel? The messenger confirmed it, saying he was most likely working with Shrills. At that, the king became absolutely furious, declaring that this was completely unacceptable. He raged that not only Shrills but also the Demon King's son were making a total mockery of their kingdom. He ordered both of them to be hunted down immediately and for wanted posters with big rewards to be plastered everywhere. Whoever managed to take out Shrills would get her spot in the Talcon squad. The messenger, whose name was Haydn, swore on his life that the two of them would be brought down. He then walked over to the Demon King's head, which was on display like a morbid museum piece. He thought to himself that the king's cursed family line was somehow still kicking. He vowed right then and there to burn every single one of the Demon King's descendants to a crisp. A bit later, the king's advisor called Haydn over and told him that General Killian should have received the message by now. He then ordered him to head back as quickly as possible. Haydn thought about Killian, knowing he was the greatest knight in the entire kingdom, even more skilled than the legendary Kilman. To catch Kella and Shrills, Killian was their man. Meanwhile, Kilman's own brother had just been told that Kilman had died sacrificing himself to defeat the Demon King. Kilman's brother asked if the Demon King was truly dead. And if he is, he continued, why do you still need my help? The messenger explained that they needed him for a new mission, to hunt down Kellan, the Demon King's very last son. Kilman shot back that he couldn't care less what anyone else wanted. The only thing that mattered to him was that demons had taken his brother's life. Elsewhere, Kella was totally stunned by the sight before him. He just couldn't believe he was expected to eat that weird-looking food. Shrills chimed in, saying he didn't have to eat if he was full, since it wasn't nearly enough for her anyway. Ren then asked Shrells what her secret was to staying so slim, and she joked that, as long as it goes in fast and comes out fast, you'll never gain weight. Ren thought that was absolutely genius. Kella, on the other hand, was just relieved to have a sister who wasn't actively trying to murder him, unlike Caldera or Tarm. Still, he was a little worried that Shrells might be jealous too. So, he cautiously asked if she held a grudge against him for being the Demon King's actual son. Shrells admitted that, sure, the thought of killing him had crossed her mind. But, she explained, she was also the daughter of that very same man, a man she'd always loved and looked up to, so she couldn't bring herself to hate Kella for it. Besides, since he carried the blood of hell, she felt a duty to protect him. Kella was left wondering, could it be that, unlike his other siblings, she genuinely wanted to keep him safe? Shrells then declared that from this day forward, she would put her own life on the line to protect him, seeing as he was the very last son of the Demon King. Kella got all flustered and managed a quick thank you. Ren, watching this whole exchange, wondered why he was blushing so hard and even tried to cozy up by offering her a juicy leg of meat. But, that move didn't exactly land. Ren then piped up that she'd also protect him with her life, no matter what. Kella just replied that he got the message, loud and clear. He then pointed out that if the kingdom had caught wind of Arsol's destruction, a whole bunch of demon hunters were bound to show up. Shrells had to agree. She added that the area was way too dangerous for them to stick around. But Kella shot back that, on the contrary, he thought it was the perfect spot to camp for the night. He promised to put in a little work and transform the area into an unbreakable stronghold. To start, they altered the entire surrounding terrain, creating a secret forest. While they were recovering, Kella had a major realization about that last fight. He understood that after using a massive amount of mana, he needed to rest, just like his father always did. Shrells, who had burned through even more mana than him, was out cold for a long time. Gradually, everyone recovered safely, all tucked away in the fortress, hidden inside their new magical forest. Meanwhile, over in the kingdom of Taloa, Killian had finally arrived. He was with the 2nd Talcon Squadron, better known as the White Talcons. His Majesty was informed of their return, and the king commented that just the sight of those young men sent a chill down his spine. Regardless, he welcomed the squadron. One of the members remarked to Captain Killian that he seemed to have gotten even stronger, and that if General Killman could see him now, he would be incredibly proud. The warrior Audria, however, quickly scolded her companion Dee for talking nonsense. Dee just shot back that Audria was the same as ever. Another soldier asked the captain if they should answer the king's call, suggesting that maybe His Majesty's anger would cool if they just eliminated Kel Khaldun. Killian excused himself from the Talcon warrior, saying he needed to show Curdly something important. Later, deep inside the king's castle, they stood before the severed head of the Demon King. Killman's brother announced that this was the demon who had taken his brother's life, but the true culprit, he declared, was Kellahel Khaldun. Deed muttered that the head was pretty disgusting. Killman's brother then asked Curly if the tracking spell would only work on the Demon King's head. She confirmed it, explaining that because it still contained traces of blood, the head could be used to track down anyone from his lineage. With that, Curly cast the spell, and Killian ordered Helkaloon to keep his eyes peeled so they could follow the target's every move from now on. Back at the fortress, Shrells woke up feeling fantastic and declared that now that she was rested, she was going to hunt down those wretched humans. She warned that the 2nd Talcon Squadron would be showing up soon. Ren was completely lost and asked, "What do you mean, a times 2nd times squadron?" Shrells explained that the kingdom of Tulua never fully trusted the 1st Talcon Squad to defeat the Demon King. In fact, they were just treated as guinea pigs for an experiment. The real squadron, the one that got all the kingdom's support, was the 2nd Squadron, the White Talcons. Kella said he'd never heard of them, and Shrells replied that this was the squad led by Killian, Killman's younger brother. It was an elite team made up of nothing but combat geniuses. Kella then asked if that meant Killman himself, the one who actually killed the Demon King, was weaker than them. Shrells bluntly replied that yes, Killman was much, much weaker. The White Talcons were on a whole other level of power, so much so that she couldn't even guess how strong they truly were. Ren then asked how in the world they could invade Tulua's kingdom against such powerful enemies. Shrells explained that the White Talcons had split up to train on their own, so it would take a while before they all got back together. That was the very reason they needed to strike against Tulua as soon as possible. But Kella pointed out that Tulua was way bigger than Arsol, and they couldn't just rely on luck in a war of that magnitude. He then reminded Shrells that they were all hunting for one person, him, the son of the Demon King. So, it was very likely that the White Talcons had already gathered. He said it made zero sense for the three of them to attack Tulua alone, with no help. They absolutely needed an army and a base of their own. Everyone listened intently to what he was saying. Kella declared that with an army of demons, they wouldn't lose to anyone, not even the White Talcons, and their base would never fall. Even if Tulua's entire army invaded, He said they were going to build the most powerful dungeon that has ever existed. This made Shrills and Ren a little nervous, and she commented that they couldn't just bet everything on battles without knowing they had a real chance. Otherwise, they'd just end up like his father. Kella clarified, first, they create the most powerful dungeon in the world, and only then would they start the war against Tulua. But upon hearing the details of this plan, Ren also started getting hyped up, and Shrills admitted that the plan made a lot of sense. She said she wouldn't expect anything less from the Demon King's son. Kella secretly thought it was a good thing they liked the idea, because he had literally just made it all up on the spot. Shrills announced that the first step would be to assemble an army, and she knew exactly who to call. It turned out they were both totally pumped for a war, and Kella could see they were really on board with the whole plan. He figured it was a sweet deal for him too, since he'd finally get the chance to build his own world, the one he'd been mapping out in his head but never got to make real. This time, he was going to make his world absolutely perfect, and he was dead set on it. So, Kella turned to Shrills and asked if she knew any demons they could count on. Their first step was to get the lay of the land. They needed to learn all about the region's geography. Shrills thought that was a sharp idea and said she knew just the person to help them out. A little later on their trip, Kella started picking up Arsol's magic. And, of course, Ren got super jealous watching him get all buddy-buddy with her sister. She was definitely a girl with some issues. Kella found the magic incredibly tough to learn, but thanks to his Demon King blood, he got the hang of it in no time. He was seriously impressed with himself when he realized he was slinging magic with his bare hands, thinking he was getting closer and closer to nailing his goal. 4 days later, Shrills announced they were almost at their destination. Ren wondered if a demon could actually live in a place so out in the middle of nowhere. Shrills explained that it wasn't always so desolate. Not until the day the Talkins ambushed the place. She suddenly ordered everyone to freeze, but right then, a demon lunged forward, believing they were part of the Talkin squad. It stabbed Shrills in the shoulder, but she stood perfectly still as if she didn't feel a thing. She calmly said she knew this would happen because the demons had foreseen it. Ren couldn't believe it and asked why she was just taking it and why she didn't just tell them the truth from the get-go. But Kella told her to zip it, saying he trusted Shrills' plan. The demon army started laying into Shrills, who still didn't fight back. All she did was apologize, silently taking all their anger, almost like it was a necessary step for the demons to feel better. Then, one of them recognized her stance as a symbolic gesture known only to the Earth demons. Seizing the moment, Shrills introduced herself as a fellow demon and again apologized for everything she had done. The demons were skeptical, asking if she was for real, since the last time they saw her, she was with Talkin. That's when Kella stepped in, confirming her story and vouching that Shrills was telling the truth. He declared with total confidence that she had his word, as the last direct descendant of the ancient Demon Kingdom's bloodline. When they sensed the Demon King's power radiating from Kella, the demons were convinced. They all dropped to one knee, acknowledging him as their young master, and announced they were the Earth Demons, pledging their reverence to his majesty. Roos piped up that he knew all along there were some trustworthy demons out there. Kella, meanwhile, was just taking in the incredible sight before him, finding himself looking at a massive demon civilization. He thought to himself, hey, maybe putting together an army won't be so tough after all. The Earth Demons welcomed him with open arms and a whole lot of affection, immediately starting to prepare a feast, a welcoming ceremony, and all sorts of tributes for him. Kella noticed the architecture here was totally different from the demon castle back in Arsal. This whole city was built without any magic, yet it was enormous and crafted from top-notch materials. He was blown away by the city's sheer size and the number of demons calling it home, especially since the whole thing was hidden deep underground. Kella had to admit that Shrills was right on the money. The Earth Demon's talents were going to be absolutely crucial for their plans. Shrills just grinned and said, "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. There's a perfect warrior here we need to recruit." That definitely got Kella's attention. Shrills explained that the Tan had stumbled upon their city while heading to the Demon King's castle. They just wrecked the place, invading and wiping out tons of Earth demons on direct orders from General Killman. And to make a horrible situation even worse, Killman also ordered his troops to burn down the entire surrounding forest, which basically put the Earth demons on the brink of extinction. But right in the middle of all that chaos, one warrior stepped up to shield his people and protect them to the very end. He managed to strike a deal with Killman, and even the general himself had to respect the guy's guts. When Kella heard this, he was amazed and just had to know who this warrior was. And that's when she revealed his name, Douglas, a son of the Earth demons. Apparently, Killman took a real interest in the kid, even remarking that if Douglas had been born a human, a lot of his problems would have been solved right then and there. He ordered his men to stand down and decided to leave the city to get back on his way to the demon castle. Douglas, completely stunned by this, was silent and didn't know how to respond. Shrills pointed out that Douglas's bravery was what had saved his people, a fact that Douglas could barely wrap his head around. Back in the present, Rose explained that Douglas never ran away and did everything he could to save every last member of his tribe. Ren was pretty impressed with the story, admitting that the warrior definitely seemed trustworthy. She figured a demonic warrior from the earth demons with that kind of heart would be a huge asset to them. Kella said he'd love to go find Douglas, but one of the demons suggested it might be better if they just looked for someone else instead. But Kella insisted, telling them he wanted to be taken to Douglas and asking where he was right now. Later, inside a blacksmith's shop, Kella asked if Douglas really dared to defy him, to which Douglas replied that just because Kella was the Demon King's son, it didn't mean he was obligated to follow his orders. When Kella asked what would happen if he used force against him, Douglas shot back that he would go down fighting, and when Kella questioned why he was so determined to stay there, Douglas explained that he was born and raised in this place, and he had a duty to protect his homeland that he simply couldn't walk away from. Kella thought to himself that Douglas was just as stubborn as everyone claimed. Douglas just offered a simple apology, and Kella recalled how even in his past life, he had tried incredibly hard to win Douglas over as an ally and had failed. Unfortunately, it looked like he might not be able to recruit him this time around either. While he was mulling this over, he took a look around the place and noticed that the city's architecture was amazingly efficient. He really wished he had one of these knowledgeable demons working for him. In the meantime, Shrills and Ren were completely hammered, singing the praises of the earth demon liquor and declaring how amazing it was. Seeing this, Kella got a bit annoyed, thinking about how he was working his tail off while they were just having a good time. A little later, though, he was drinking right along with them and had to admit this stuff was way tastier than beer. Another demon showed up, announcing that everyone had had enough to drink, so Kella told them to get some rooms ready for everyone to crash for the night. Later, as Kella was lying in bed, he was so drowsy that he didn't even notice the demons creeping up on him. The earth demons were there with one goal in mind, to take him out. One of them swung an axe right at Kella's neck, but was totally shocked when he managed to dodge it. Kella sat up and said that now he was sure about something. The demons demanded to know how he pulled that off when he looked dead asleep, and disgustedly called that sneaky Kella a coward, before telling each other to try and finish the job. Kella thought that, right from the start, a few things had seemed really fishy. He'd been wondering why Douglas was crafting items that weren't weapons, like a set of handcuffs that were obviously not made for orcs, which meant they could only be for him or his friends. He also clued in that people were tailing him and watching his every move, with one of them sticking to him like glue. From that moment on, Kella started paying much closer attention to his surroundings and sensed a faint magical barrier in the city, one so subtle that he only noticed it because he had the Demon King's mana. On top of all that, there was another really weird detail. Ka had mentioned that Douglas was protecting not just the land demons, but also the dark elves. The thing is, Kella hadn't spotted a single dark elf in the village, and that's when it all clicked. So, Kella unleashed a quick attack on all the demons surrounding him. He then faced Douglas, telling him he knew that Douglas had promised Killman he wouldn't let the dark elves get taken out, but he also wouldn't let anyone else have them. This basically meant Douglas wasn't protecting the elves out of the goodness of his heart, but just because he didn't want to lose them. Douglas was stunned and asked how Kella figured all of that out. Kella then ordered him to take down the barrier right away. A bit later, Kella was using Douglas as a hostage and figured that, just as he'd expected, everyone was worried about him. Otherwise, the plan would be a total bust. The elder asked if Douglas had actually failed his mission, and Douglas could only apologize. That's when Kella yelled for nobody to move an inch, warning that if anyone got closer, Douglas would be done for. Faced with the threat, the elder called Kella a total coward. Later, standing near the barrier, Kella commanded them to open it. He placed the crystal into a small slot, and in that moment, the whole truth came to light. Behind the barrier, all of the dark elves were being held prisoner, as if they were trapped in some kind of prison. Kella realized the situation was way worse than he guessed. Just then, Shrills ran up, and her reaction pretty much confirmed his suspicions. The moment she laid eyes on the scene, she was absolutely horrified. Kella immediately told Silos to get the dark elves out of there, pronto, and then asked Shrills to show him their memories using a magical transfer. Shrills explained that while memory transfer magic was possible, the images wouldn't be as crystal clear as if they were coming from her own mind. But Kella was insistent, so she went ahead. She gently touched one of the dark elves, and just like that, their memories flooded directly into Kella's mind. What he saw in the vision was a living nightmare. The elf's mother had been forced into motherhood, and sadly, every single person born there shared the same terrible fate. Right from a young age, the elves were raised like livestock. Among the children, any who caught the eye of the nobles were singled out and taken away. They were then sold for a hefty price to the earth demons. A few of the adults who'd been captured from the outside world would whisper stories about what it was like out there, tales of blue skies and vast oceans, and a world where you could travel freely, things they could only dream of in that awful place. If any of them had one final wish before their time was up, it would be for their children to at least get a chance to experience life on the outside. Seeing all this, Kella was absolutely furious. He swore that those wretched scoundrels would pay for what they'd done, vowing to wipe out every last earth demon. He then spun around and landed a punch on Douglas so powerful, it sent him flying and nearly shattered his body. Shrills demanded to know how he could have the nerve to do something so horrible to children. Douglas just replied coldly that dark elves are a rare commodity, and humans have an insatiable desire for them. He went on, saying they're a naturally sought-after race, making them perfect for being kept as pets. When asked how he could dare do this to his fellow demons, he just shot back that with the Demon King gone, his people had to find a way to survive, no matter the cost. Hearing that, Kella, seething with rage, began to gather his mana. He remembered his own past life, how he'd also suffered under the thumb of his own parents, but he knew what these kids had endured was 1,000 times worse. There was no way he could let this continue. Kella looked at Shriels and Ren and declared they were going to finish what Killman started. Shriels agreed in a heartbeat, vowing to personally take down every demon who had betrayed their own kind. Ren added that their actions were unforgivable and that she wanted to purge this place of the earth demons for good. But Douglas wasn't going down easy. He quickly called for backup, knowing it was just the three of them against a whole army. Instantly, the earth demons charged forward to attack. Ren pointed out that they were seriously outnumbered, and Shriels couldn't believe these guys had the gall to rebel against the Demon King's own son. But even so, the trio stood their ground, expertly fending off the enemy's assault. Ren declared with confidence that Kella was destined to become the next king. And right at that moment, Kella effortlessly blocked a strike from Douglas, thinking to himself that this wasn't a game anymore. This was his reality, and he decided he was going to change things with his own two hands. He planted a solid kick right on Douglas's face, realizing things were different now. From this point on, he would act without a moment's hesitation. All the while, the dark elves just watched in stunned silence. One of the elves whispered, asking if these newcomers were really there to save them. A debate broke out among the dark elves. Some argued that they should jump in and help, but others were hesitant, pointing out how dangerous it would be. One elf, however, spoke up with a firm voice, reminding them that if their saviors lost this fight, they'd all just be tortured again. You could see the trauma from everything he'd been through written all over his face, and Kella noticed it. He then turned his gaze to Douglas and asked if he could hear that, the echoes of pain, the endless suffering they had caused. Kella declared that no one was getting away with what they'd done to the elves. But it turned out Douglas still had one last trick up his sleeve. He popped a strange pill into his mouth, and a moment later, every single earth demon followed suit. They all knew that if they lost this fight, it was all over for them. What they were swallowing was a special kind of earth ore. Ren was completely shocked, saying she thought that stuff was just a myth. This ore, which looked a lot like crystals, supercharged their bodies with incredible strength, boosting their physical power by dozens of times. In just a few moments, Douglas and the other demons started bulking up, growing to an enormous size. Their bodies warped and transformed, making them look like hulking orcs with freakishly huge muscles. Kella knew right away that his normal demon energy wouldn't be enough to take them on now, but he also knew he couldn't go all out, since he still hadn't fully mastered the massive power he'd inherited from the Demon King. Despite that, Douglas moved in to finish the job. Kella sensed the danger and braced himself for the attack. But just then, thick roots burst from the ground, completely ensnaring Douglas's body. It was Shirley's magic, cast to save her new ally. One of the dark elves, a man named Wood, stood up and declared he would never let anyone torture him again. The other elves were completely floored, asking if Wood was actually standing up to Douglas. Meanwhile, a furious Douglas demanded to know how Wood dared to get in his way, threatening to torture him until he begged for death. But before he could make a move, Douglas suddenly felt Kella's power surging towards him. Kella announced that this sort of thing would never happen again, right as he pierced Douglas's stomach with an arrow made of pure demonic mana. He then looked over at the elf, asked if his name was really Wood, and told him, "I like your style. You're welcome to join me." Meanwhile, Douglas, despite his serious wound, shouted that Wood was only alive thanks to him, but Kella shot back that the days of anyone being tortured were over. At that, Douglas exploded in a fit of rage and shattered the roots holding him. He began to grow even larger, his body twisting into a more monstrous form than before. He unleashed a blow so powerful it sent Kella flying clear across the cave. Kella could feel the immense power of that earth magic. Douglas then charged straight for Wood, grabbing him by the neck and promising to rip his head clean off. Wood was struggling to breathe, and Kella realized Douglas had completely lost it. He was more focused on killing Wood than on their actual fight. Seeing he was out of time, Kella prepared to attack from a distance, but in that very instant, his mind was yanked into another plane of existence where he came face to face with an energy left behind by his father, the Demon King. The energy immediately called Kella an idiot, pointing out that he'd become so weak he was basically just standing there having a conversation with his own subconscious. It warned him that he needed to snap out of it and act fast. Kella agreed, quickly asking if there was any possible way to save Wood. The energy explained that he wasn't ready to wield the full power he'd inherited. His body and mind first needed to be in perfect sync. Only then could he learn to control it all. Kella said he was done with the explanations and just wanted to know how to use the power. The energy agreed, revealing that there was, in fact, something he could use right now. Right before it vanished, the energy called him by his real name, Kang-chi, and said, "See you soon." Kella was completely thrown off, wondering how on earth that entity knew his birth name. And just like that, he snapped back to reality. In his hands, he was now holding the demonic fire bow of hell. With this, Kella knew he could definitely protect Wood. He yelled for Wood to get his head down. Douglas was caught completely off guard. He never saw this coming. Wood, despite being weak, managed to summon his own magic for defense. Kella declared this was the end of Douglas's cruel rampage and launched a demonic fire arrow straight into his face, which landed with incredible force. The second the flames made contact with his body, he was instantly charred, burning alive for everyone to see. Kella watched intently as the blue flames consumed Douglas, thinking to himself that it was a perfect shot and there was no way he could have survived. In the middle of the demonic fire, Douglas's body was reduced to nothing but ash, and Kella, still a little shaken, wondered about that mysterious entity he'd met in his own consciousness. Meanwhile, the rest of the Earth demons were still standing and itching for a fight, but Sheer commented that she couldn't go all out or she'd end up hitting the Dark Elves too. But Kella told her not to worry, promising he'd take care of it himself, and fast. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he unleashed a shower of flaming arrows using his demonic mana, which struck the enemies with so much power that they were wiped out instantly. Shur was amazed to see Kella using actual demon fire arrows and couldn't help but wonder if his mana had gotten even more powerful. Ren also noticed that Kella now had ranged attacks, realizing this would be a huge advantage in their upcoming battles. Later on, once all the Earth demons had been taken care of, Shreels commented that the Earth ores were way stronger than she had ever imagined. Ren added that she had no idea the ore actually consumed the life force of its user. Musing on this, Kella concluded that they absolutely had to investigate these crystals more thoroughly. Then, Kella turned to all the assembled Dark Elves and announced with conviction that from this moment on, they were free to live their lives as they pleased, never to be captured again. The elves were totally stunned, not sure they could even believe their own ears, and asked if they were actually free. Kella confirmed it with a nod. He told them they could finally leave this nightmarish place and get their children somewhere safe. With tears of joy streaming down their faces, all the elves knelt and bowed to Kella, thanking him for his incredible kindness. Shreels remarked that at least the whole mission wasn't a complete waste, but admitted she still felt pretty betrayed after being tricked by the Earth demons. Ren just replied that it was a real shame. But hey, there was no point in dwelling on the past. Kella then went over to Wood and asked if she'd been born in this place or captured. Wood told him she'd been captured. Kella then asked if she had any family left, but Wood quietly said no. Sadly, there was nobody left for her. Kella looked Wood right in the eyes and said that in that case, she should come with them. He explained that they needed someone who knew the area to guide them, but Wood hesitated, saying she wasn't a real Earth demon and wasn't as skilled at navigating as the others. She added that she probably wouldn't be very useful to Kella. Kella, however, just smiled and told her not to worry about that at all. He pointed out that elves are naturally in tune with nature, and more importantly, Wood had already shown she was strong and brave enough to stand up to danger. He said that her courage was worth more than any talent and asked if she wanted to join their group. Wood was absolutely amazed by Kella. She realized she couldn't even remember what her own parents looked like. She'd been abandoned, then captured, and had lived in this awful place for so long. She honestly thought she was going to die right there in that cursed place. With fresh tears filling her eyes, Wood asked Kella if she could really, truly leave, if it was okay for her to follow him. Kella told her she wouldn't be following. She'd be walking right beside him. Then he helped her to her feet and suggested they get moving. A little later, outside the Earth Demon village, the now free Dark Elves started saying their heartfelt goodbyes to Kella and his friends. Kella was a bit concerned, since many of them had never even seen the world outside, but he felt better when he remembered how connected to nature they were. He knew they would adapt quickly. After all, anywhere was better than where they'd been. Wood also took a moment to say farewell to her people before they left. In no time, Ren was already nagging Kella, reminding him to be more obedient, to which he smoothly replied that he would do exactly as she wished. Shreels then announced that their top priority was finding a riverbank. As if on cue, Wood chimed in that she could smell water coming from a certain direction. Shriels praised her, saying she did a great job, and a beaming Wood happily thanked her back. Ren asked Shriels why they needed a river so badly, and Shriels explained that they couldn't just keep walking forever and needed to find an easier way to travel. By finding a river, they might find something useful to help them on their journey. Ren then joked that she wanted to catch a dragon, to which Shriels playfully replied that she was being a little unrealistic. She sarcastically asked if Ren wanted a unicorn with that, too. Just then, Wood started walking in the direction she pointed out and, to everyone's absolute astonishment, there was actually a river right there. Near the bank, 2 unicorns were drinking water, and gliding over the river was a real-life dragon. Shriels was in complete shock. She was totally convinced that neither dragons nor unicorns even existed in this realm. Meanwhile, back in the Earth Demon Village, there was still one last demon desperately pleading for help. Curly confirmed that this was the last survivor and that she'd been discussing it with the folks from White Talon. Deed asked if her tracking spell was malfunctioning, and Curly admitted she wasn't sure what was causing it, but it was picking up several different individuals in all sorts of directions. Kao commented in disbelief that there was no way the Demon King could have left that many kids running around. He then asked if there was really no way to pinpoint which one of them was Kella. Unfortunately, Curly had to tell him no. Audrey sounded worried, wondering what they were going to do now, since they couldn't afford to waste time on such a long and uncertain hunt. Kilman announced that he saw no other choice. They would have to hunt down every last one of the demons scattered across the continent. He then asked Curly where they should begin. She explained that she was the only one who could teleport to faraway places, which would make scouting much easier. Deed thought this was fantastic, since they could just get rid of her after she found what they were looking for. Without missing a beat, a determined Curly stood up, cast her spell, and vanished in a flash. Deed was pretty impressed by how quickly she acted. Kilman, however, bluntly stated that it was time to start taking out some demons. Back in the present time, Curly confirmed she could feel the energy of Hellcaloon's children in the area and asked the last demon standing if the one responsible had passed through. The demon shakily said yes, explaining that he was the one who had eliminated all the other demons. When Curly demanded to know where he went, the demon couldn't answer and just begged for his life. With no hesitation, Curly finished him off right there, saying he was useless to her if he couldn't provide that simple piece of information. She then announced that their only option was to follow the trail of energy to hunt down Hellcaloon. After traveling for several days, the group finally arrived at the river they were looking for. Shriels remarked that it took them quite a while, but pointed out how impressive Wood's elven tracking skills were. Wood humbly thanked him for the kind words, but Ren immediately warned Kella not to get too cocky, since he was still a total rookie. He just shyly apologized. Just then, Kella mentioned that he was starving because they hadn't really eaten properly for the past few days. Ren immediately offered to catch something for him, proud of her skills in that department. However, before she could even make a move, a bunch of fish suddenly started leaping out of the river all on their own. Everyone was shocked for a moment, until they realized it was Wood using her nature powers to control the water, making the fish jump right into her hands. Shriels commented on how amazing Wood's ability was, and hearing this, Ren started to feel like she was falling behind everyone else in the group. Trying to make herself useful, she offered to at least start the fire, but Shriels told her there was no need. At that, Ren's spirits sank, and she began to feel completely useless. Later, as everyone ate, they all praised Wood for doing such an excellent job with the fishing. Wood, however, noticed that Ren wasn't touching her food. She asked if everything was okay, but Ren was clearly feeling down and had no appetite. Shriels then joked that if she wasn't going to eat her portion, he'd gladly take it. Seeing how discouraged she looked, Kella realized how sad Ren was. So, he announced that fish alone wasn't enough for him and asked if someone could find some fruit too. Instantly, Ren shot to her feet, excited by the new opportunity, and declared that she would go find the most delicious fruit she could. Just as Wood offered to grab the fruit, boasting that he could find it in a flash, Kella stepped in and suggested that Ren should go instead. Ren, getting super excited, immediately piped up that she'd do it, promising to find the absolute best fruit for her master. Shriels, watching Ren's bubbly reaction, quietly remarked that she was a pretty easy person to read. He then leaned over and discreetly asked Kella if he'd only suggested it to lift her spirits, but Kella just calmly shook his head, saying he genuinely wanted some fruit. Still curious about this whole unicorn thing, Shriels asked Wood if there were actually any in the area. Wood confirmed that yes, she could sense one's presence, but it was still very young. This got Shriels thinking that if unicorns were real, then maybe. Just maybe there really was a dragon like Ren had mentioned. Still, Shriels couldn't shake his doubt, insisting there were no dragons around here. Meanwhile, Ren was already happily on her way, dashing through the forest to find the perfect fruit for her master, until she finally spotted a fruit tree. To get to the fruit at the very top, she propped herself up on something kinda weird. which, to her absolute shock, started to move. When she glanced down, she realized in pure terror that she was standing on the head of a gigantic dragon. The poor girl was so spooked, her soul nearly left her body right then and there. Back at the camp, completely oblivious to Ren's little predicament, Kella was asking Wood if she could truly feel the Earth's energy. Wood naturally said yes, explaining that it was tough to put into words. She could just feel nature's energy within a certain area. Kella thought that sounded a lot like a minimap from a game he used to play. Shreels chimed in, saying an ability like that would be incredibly useful for locating dungeons. But Wood clarified that her range wasn't all that wide, so it might not be the game changer they were imagining. Still fascinated by the skill, Kella wondered if there was any way to make it stronger with training. Wood mentioned she heard of a method, but it was a bit of a long shot. She would need to eat a clairvoyant stone from a dragon that had lived for over 1,000 years. Apparently, that was the only way to boost her tracking ability by up to 100 times. Shrells' jaw dropped, exclaiming that a 100-fold increase would be absolutely insane. He pointed out that just finding a dragon is a huge challenge, let alone actually defeating one. This made Kella wonder, asking if dragons were really all that tough. "Oh, you have no idea," Shrells replied, explaining that if you pictured a food chain, dragons would be sitting right at the very top. They were the ultimate predators, and on top of that, they have a deep-seated hatred for demons. The weirdest part is, only humans could ever hope to tame them, and even then, only the most powerful humans could pull it off. Kella found that pretty ironic, seeing as he always thought of humans as the weaker species, yet they were the only ones who could control such mighty creatures. Shrells totally agreed, admitting that the true nature of dragons was a mystery to him, too. At that moment, Kella asked Shrells what exactly a dragon's clairvoyant stone was, adding that he really loved to get his hands on one. But Shrells urged him to forget about it, warning him that getting fixated on stuff like that would just be a distraction. Kella clarified that he wasn't after it for himself, he wanted to find one so Wood could power up her abilities. Before their chat could go any further, Ren came tearing through the trees in a total panic, screaming for her master to help her as a massive dragon chased her down. Shocked, Shrells stammered, "You've got to be kidding me, is that really a dragon?" To which Wood calmly replied, "Yep, and it's a very big one." Hearing that, the entire group immediately took off, scrambling to get as far away from there as possible. As they ran, Kella yelled over to Shrells, "I thought you said it was hard to find dragons," and a frantic Shrells yelled back, "I have no idea why one is right here." Just then, Curdly happened to be getting close to the area and clearly heard the dragon's roar. As she began scouting around for any demons, Kella's group was huddled behind a large rock. Luckily for them, the dragon ended up wandering off in the opposite direction. Breathing a sigh of relief, Shrells said, "Phew, I think it's finally gone." But then, he immediately turned to Ren and demanded to know how on earth she led a dragon back to their camp when all she had to do was grab some fruit. Ren, looking guilty, apologized, explaining she had no clue a dragon was just chilling out by the fruit tree. Wood, ever the analyst, observed the situation and noted that based on the dragon's size, it had probably been around for over 1,000 years. It clicked for Kella, then the dragon had to have a clairvoyant stone. But before he could even finish that thought, a woman's voice chimed in, confirming that the dragon definitely had one. That's when they all noticed Curdly was standing right there with them. Not recognizing her right away, Kella asked who in the world that was, and Shrells quickly identified her. It was none other than Curdly from the White Talon. Totally alarmed, Ren asked what a member of the White Talon was doing here, and the whole group immediately jumped into their battle stances. Shrells explained that Curdly had a nasty reputation as an extremely cruel and merciless mage, famous for taking people out without a second thought. At that moment, Kella was just thinking how tired he was of dealing with all this danger, because he honestly thought that after escaping the Demon King's castle, he'd get to live a quiet, peaceful life. But it seemed like nothing but trouble was on the menu this time, especially now that he was up against such a dangerous mage. However, Curdly just calmly told everyone to chill out, since there was no reason to fight at the moment. Looking pointedly at the Talon trader, she said that fighting would be completely useless, as she could easily wipe them all out with a single spell. Kella, clearly spooked, asked Shrells if she was serious, and Shrells replied grimly that she didn't doubt it for a second. She was absolutely positive that Curdly was stronger than all of them combined. Panicking, Ren desperately asked what they were supposed to do now, but Curdly repeated that they didn't need to throw down right now. As long as they followed her without making any trouble, they'd get to keep on living. Kella, feeling suspicious, asked why she wanted the group to tag along with her. Curdly explained that she was going to take them all to meet their captain, Killian, the leader of the White Talon. As soon as Shrells heard the name, he saw they were already on the move and nervously mentioned that they were now up against White Killian. Curdly then explained that her captain was on the lookout for Kell Calden and kindly invited them to tag along. Kella wasn't having it, though, flat out refusing and saying they'd surely be goners if they went with her. Curdly, however, insisted that if they just complied, they might at least live a little longer. But Kella was resolute, thinking to himself that there was no way he'd accept such a pitiful end. So, he immediately went on the offensive, launching an arrow straight at her. But, without even breaking a sweat, Curdly's magic shield just popped up and blocked it, making the massive gap in their power levels crystal clear. Seeing this, Shreels immediately yelled for everyone to attack all at once, but even with their combined assault, Curdly's barriers held strong, not even flinching at their attacks. Full of determination, Ren then charged forward to take on the barrier by herself, declaring that she would never let them take Kella, but her attack barely left a scratch. A worried Shreels immediately shouted for Ren to fall back, warning her it was way too dangerous to be that close. Just then, Curdly countered by hurling a massive ice crystal right at Ren, which slammed into her and sent her flying. Following that, Curdly coolly stated that she'd have no problem just taking Kella's body, and then she immediately unleashed her ice storm spell. Realizing the immediate danger, Shreels quickly gathered everyone under his magical shield, while Ren, despite her injuries, managed to scramble to safety just in time. Safe inside the shield, Kella asked with concern if Ren was okay, but she simply apologized, feeling terrible that she couldn't be more helpful to her master. Kella, however, told her this was no time for regrets. At the same time, Shreels warned the group that his shield wouldn't last much longer under Curdly's relentless assault. Getting desperate, Kella asked Shreels if there was any way at all they could counter such a powerful spell, but Shreels explained that, unfortunately, the power gap between them and their enemy was just too wide. As if to prove his point, Curdly's attacks continued nonstop, causing bigger and bigger cracks to spread across Shreels' protective shield. Everyone knew that if that shield shattered, they wouldn't stand a chance. Feeling utterly desperate, Kella frantically searched his mind for some kind of last-minute solution. That's when he remembered that mysterious presence he'd felt inside his mind before. He thought that maybe, just maybe, if he could reach out to it again, he could get some help. Focusing hard, Kella began to gather his energy. This immediately worried Shreels, who asked what on earth he was doing, explaining that using his strength in there would only weaken the shield faster. Despite the warning, Kella didn't waver, continuing his attempt to summon the presence that lived within his consciousness. All this commotion ended up catching the dragon's attention once more, and it began to turn its massive head toward them, intrigued by the conflict. At that very moment, Curdly finally sensed the true energy of the Demon King flowing from the boy, realizing the power only manifested when he was in a state of deep concentration. It all made sense now. She finally understood why he had been so difficult to track down. Still, she was determined to finish her mission and finish it now. Curdly coldly declared that this was the end of the line for Kella. At the same time, Kella was frantically wondering where that mysterious entity was, the one that only ever showed up when he was on the brink of death. With options running out, Shreels shouted a final warning that the shield couldn't hold any longer. And in the very next instant, it completely shattered into pieces. Just as Curdly's fatal attack was about to strike Kella down, the dragon suddenly materialized in front of them, blocking the blast and shielding the entire group, a move that stunned everyone, including Curdly. Completely baffled, she wondered why on earth a dragon would protect a group of demons. It was something she never could have predicted. The dragon, however, moved closer to Kella, gently lowering its head as if asking for a pat, and in that quiet moment, something truly special occurred. Kella and the dragon's minds began to link up, sharing memories with one another. It was then that Kella realized this dragon had a very strong bond with his own mother. Within those shared memories, he saw it plain as day. His mother and this very dragon had been the closest of friends in the past, always journeying side by side. Then, out of nowhere, Kella clearly heard the dragon's voice inside his head, calling his name. Startled, he wondered in confusion if he was experiencing some kind of telepathy. Then, in a completely unexpected move, the dragon coughed up a crystal right into Kella's hand. It was his clairvoyant stone. Absolutely stunned, Kella asked the dragon why it was suddenly giving him something so incredibly valuable. The dragon shot back that there was no time to explain, urging him to hide his power and get away as fast as he could. A confused Kella couldn't help but ask what was going on, but the dragon just insisted they had to run, right now. Then it turned and blasted Curly with a huge burst of fire. Curly, who was safe behind her barrier, thought it was super weird that a dragon was protecting demons. That's just not something you see every day. And while she was trying to figure it out, Kella knew this wasn't the time for questions and yelled for everyone to make a run for it. The whole group took off, with Curly just watching them go, realizing that this dragon was seriously powerful and wondering why on earth it decided to jump into the fight just then. But even with all the dragon's strength, its attacks couldn't even scratch Curly's amazing barrier. She even taunted it, asking if that was the best it had. Deciding to end things quickly, she summoned a massive spell called Meteor and launched it right at the dragon. As the incredible magic hurtled towards it, the dragon's mind flashed back to Kella's mother and all the wonderful times they'd shared. Just a moment later, the meteor made a direct hit. When Kella glanced back, all he could see was the dragon's still, fallen body. Curly remarked that a dragon helping demons had to be hiding some kind of really bizarre secret, and she figured she'd just peek into its memories before it was gone for good. But before she got the chance, the dragon started to engulf its own body in flames, saying with deep sadness that humans were just so arrogant and unkind, and that one day, everyone would pay for the terrible things they'd done. And with that, the dragon turned to ash, ending its own life, so no one could ever see its memories. A frustrated Curly realized this whole thing had bought Kella and his friends more than enough time to disappear. And while she admitted this was a bit of a setback, she declared it wouldn't change a thing about Kella Calden's ultimate destiny. She promised that all of those demons were fated to fall to the White Talons. Meanwhile, once they were safe, the demons started wondering what was up with that dragon. First off, it seemed like it was trying to attack them, but then it switched sides and helped them escape. Wood, however, pointed out that the dragon wasn't really helping all of them, it was only helping Kella. Shri totally agreed, adding that she definitely saw the dragon form some kind of special bond with Kella, and it even looked like it used a unique magic on him. Super curious, Shri asked Kella if he had any idea what was going on. Kella explained that when he made that connection with the dragon, he actually got to see some of its memories. Turns out, that dragon was incredibly close with his mother. Ren, totally fascinated by this, mentioned that dragons usually don't team up with demons, so it was wild to think about what kind of story brought Kella's mom and a dragon together. Kella admitted he had no clue either, but he confessed that he felt a really strong, familiar connection to the dragon. On top of that, it didn't just protect him, it also gave him its clairvoyant stone. Right then, the group realized that, when you think about it, Kella's mother was the one who had truly saved them all, thanks to her bond with that dragon. Kella was lost in thought, thinking about how powerful that connection felt. It was something really deep and special. You could even see it in the dragon's eyes. After a moment, Kella sent a silent, heartfelt thank you to the dragon for the clairvoyant stone, happy he could finally give it to Wood to boost his powers. Shri agreed, saying that with an item like that, escaping from the White Talons and staying safe would be way easier. Still, Wood had to ask Kella if he was absolutely sure about handing over something so incredibly rare. Kella didn't even hesitate, saying yes because Wood was the only one who could use the item to its full potential. With that, a determined Wood consumed the stone right away. As he did, he felt this incredible power surge through his body as the dragon's memories flooded his mind, and as he saw these memories, Wood witnessed the creature's tragic past. It turned out the dragon was born in a lab and was basically a test subject for humans, forced to go through some really awful experiments every single day. It had to endure constant mistreatment, with parts of its body being removed over and over again, all for the sake of those humans' curiosity and goals. This unbelievably cruel treatment went on for centuries, until the poor dragon had been driven completely mad. The humans would even comment to each other that the dragon had stopped crying altogether. Its tears had run dry ages ago. The dragon had given up all hope and was just waiting for the end. But then, everything took a wild turn thanks to truck-kunned, the baddest and meanest demon king on the block, who decided to crash the human kingdom's party, causing a whole lot of chaos and sending everyone running. In the middle of all that commotion, the lab where he was kept came crashing down, and just like that, the dragon finally broke free from that awful prison. After what felt like forever, he was soaring through the skies again, taking in that sweet, fresh air for the very first time in ages. So, the dragon flew off to find his dragon buddies, ready to spill the tea about the terrible things the humans had done to him, figuring they'd team up to teach those bullies a lesson. But, plot twist, none of the other dragons bought his story. You see, they were already super chummy with the humans, even working together in the big fight against the demons. So, no one could wrap their head around the horrible truth he was telling them. The reality, though, was way worse. Turns out, the humans had only gotten close to the dragons to make it easier to use them for their sneaky experiments, trying to figure out how to control them. But, of course, the other dragons just wouldn't listen to this shocking revelation. Feeling totally bummed out and let down, our dragon decided to try his luck with the demons, hoping to find a friendly face or at least a place to crash. Unfortunately, the demons weren't having it either and gave him the cold shoulder. Since he couldn't fit in anywhere, the poor guy was all alone. He was just drifting in a sea of sadness with nothing to live for. So, he chose to live by himself, just waiting for his story to end. But then, one totally random day, he stumbled upon a little demon kid. And that's how he met Christ. The first thing Carice did was innocently ask if the giant dragon was her mommy. The dragon was totally baffled by the question, wondering how on earth anyone could make that mistake. Before he could even get a word out, Chris ran right up and gave the dragon a huge hug, just like he was her mom. The dragon tried to explain that he was, in fact, not her mother. But in that very moment, something just clicked inside him. The dragon suddenly felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a reason he was brought into this world after all. This little kid, Karis, who just popped up out of nowhere, had sparked a feeling he hadn't felt in a very long time. When he peeked into the little demon's memories, the dragon saw it plain as day. They had both been through a lot. Just as he'd been put through the ringer by humans, Chris had also been a test subject for some nasty demon experiments. See, among the demons, there was this really nasty group called the Tarsa, who were famous for their super cruel experiments. They had actually used Caris's own mother for their research, studying dragon magic to try and control them. The second Caris hatched from her egg, she was immediately roped into their schemes too. Karis had some seriously amazing potential, picking up dragon magic like it was nothing, especially the super cool transformation magic. Because of this, the Tarsa made sure her life was full of misery right from the start. For her entire life, Christy was just miserable and hopeless until, all on her own, she figured out powerful teleportation magic and finally escaped that awful place. After roaming around by herself for a while, just exploring the world, she eventually ran into our dragon. When he put all the pieces together, the dragon wondered if maybe their meeting was destined to happen, or hey, maybe it was just a happy accident. But one thing was for sure, they had both been through so much that they couldn't possibly just act like strangers. Right then and there, Karis decided to call the dragon master. The dragon thought that sounded pretty good, and hey, it was definitely better than being called mommy. With a big, happy smile, Karis agreed, but then cheekily added that, really, a master is kind of like a mom anyway. Kella listened closely as the dragon went on to explain that he wasn't just Chris's master, he was also her guardian and mentor. After that, the dragon taught Karis all sorts of important stuff, showing her how the world really works and the proper way for a dragon to live. By his side, Karis learned tons of magic and picked up some priceless life lessons. And so, they started spending many wonderful days together. It was a huge change from the past, where their suffering made every second feel like an eternity. With all the joy and happiness they were sharing, the days just flew by. Then one day, the dragon thanked Karis completely out of the blue, and she had no idea why he was suddenly thanking her, so she asked him what was up. But the dragon just told her he felt like he needed to say thank you right at that moment. Overcome with emotion, Karis gave him a big hug, which made the dragon think about how wonderful it was to watch her grow every single day. For him, all the pain he had endured his whole life felt like nothing compared to the incredible happiness he got from raising and protecting Karis. However, one day, something strange started to happen to the dragon. He felt a very odd sensation, almost like he was about to lose consciousness. Karis, full of worry, asked him what was wrong, but the dragon just suddenly stared at her, asking who she was, and questioning if she was a human or a demon, demanding she identify herself immediately. Completely confused, Karis asked if this was some kind of test, but the dragon, having lost all control, blasted fire at her, yelling that he hated both humans and demons. Christy couldn't begin to understand what was going on. Even after all the happy times they had shared, the dragon's mind had finally shattered from the awful experiments he'd suffered in the past. His sanity had finally reached its limit, just as it had for so many other dragons before him. In that single instant, he had completely lost control of himself. Desperate, Karis asked if her master really didn't remember her, and only then did the dragon seem to snap out of it for a moment, asking in confusion what had just happened. He apologized to Karis, saying he never, ever meant to attack her. But in that moment, he realized he was seriously unwell and had to get away from her right away. Chris was devastated by her master's decision and begged him not to abandon her. But the dragon knew he had to leave to protect her, because he couldn't bear the thought of hurting her during another lapse in control. Aware that his end was coming, he decided to spend his last days cherishing the happy memories he had with her. But as time passed, he began to cycle back and forth between remembering and forgetting, realizing that most of his memories were slowly slipping away. One day, though, he felt a very familiar energy and was instinctively drawn toward it, recognizing that it was Karista's energy, the very one that lingered in his most precious memories. When he finally reached the source of that energy, he saw that it wasn't Karista, but a different child, though he felt a powerful, undeniable need to protect her. Looking into the child's memories, he understood that she was a descendant of Karis and realized he was looking at his grandchild. With newfound determination, he vowed to protect that child until the very last moment of his life. In his final breaths, the dragon gave a deep, heartfelt thanks to his beloved daughter, Karis Day. Because of her, his final days weren't filled with pain and suffering, but with the happiness and peace that came from knowing the child he had raised with so much love. At that very moment, Wood, completely moved by the memories she had just absorbed, collapsed to her knees, explaining that all of the dragon's memories had been transferred directly to her. Although she couldn't remember everything perfectly, she said it felt like a brief dream that was slowly fading, but she was absolutely certain that the dragon had died happy. Shreels, still not buying it, asked if it was really true that Wood couldn't remember the details, finding it strange that she was crying so much over something she claimed she couldn't recall clearly. Meanwhile, Wood was quietly reflecting on all the mixed feelings of happiness and sadness from the dragon's memories, which were now a part of her. Wood commented that the new abilities probably wouldn't all pop up at once, and would most likely develop slowly over time. In a worst-case scenario, Kella might have a hard time using these new powers for a while. However, Ren replied that it wouldn't be an issue, since she would have plenty of time. Wood then explained that for the time being, they had no choice but to wait for Kella's abilities to fully awaken. Shortly after that, Wood asked what exactly their next move should be, since they weren't sure if the group that had been chasing them could find them again. She explained that they needed to find a safe place to lay low and fast, then asked Shreels to show Kella the world map. As they looked at the map together, they saw that to the right was the reign of Tulua, which was the human continent, while the demon continent was over on the left side. The spot they were in was right on the border between these two kingdoms. Hearing this, Kella said that their best course of action would be to head south. Ren questioned if heading south was really smarter than going directly into demon territory. Kella then explained that there was a reason he was sent to Arsal, and part of that was definitely to find Shrills. However, the demon's reign had collapsed. So, it was a safe bet that the entire demon continent was now overrun by humans. Shrills confirmed his theory, adding that before the Demon King passed away, it wasn't just the members of the Tulkan group, but the entire human army that had seized the opportunity to completely invade the demon continent. At this, Ren suggested they should try to gather the remaining demons to follow Kella, but he explained that right now, that would be pretty much impossible. Kella reminded them that, as Ren had seen for herself in the territory of the Earth Demons, he was known as the cowardly son of the Demon King, who had bailed. So, not even the demons themselves were fans of his right now. They'd probably keep thinking that way until he could show them his true power. Ren then commented that maybe not even Shrills could sort the situation out easily, and Shrills agreed, saying that other than her own father, there wasn't any solid proof that she was really the Demon King's daughter. Besides, because of everything she'd done during her time with the Tulkan group, earning back the trust and acceptance of the demons was going to be an uphill battle. Faced with this pretty complicated scenario, Kella announced that the first order of business was to create a dungeon to serve as their base. He also explained that he needed to rack up some major accomplishments to regain the demons' trust and get them to follow his lead again. Above all else, he needed to power up, and fast. Wood was immediately on board, saying they were finally motivated and that from here on out, they needed to achieve great things, earning recognition and honor so that the demons would naturally start to rally around them again. To do this, Kella would need to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he deserved to be the next Demon King. However, Wood concluded that for now, the most important thing was to buy some time to establish a strong foothold and create a solid game plan for the future. With that, Kella decided that their first base of operations would be in the south, and everyone was super excited about this idea. He felt an immense sense of relief because even though he knew the plan wasn't very detailed or foolproof, he realized that he finally had allies by his side and the companions he needed so badly. Of course, he was still being hunted by those ridiculously powerful monsters. Taking on the Tulkan group right now would be a seriously bad idea. For the time being, he needed to gather more intel and think over everything he'd been through so far. Kella started to realize that so many things in this world were just like elements from the game he played in his past life, from the major events to even the names and descriptions of the monsters. There was definitely a deep connection between this world and his old life, and he was absolutely planning to use it to his advantage. With the power he had now, his awesome status as the son of the Demon King, and all the insider knowledge he picked up from his past life, he was going to play this just like his favorite strategy game and build his path to a big win. Nothing he had experienced was going to be for nothing. Meanwhile, in a demon city nearby, a few demons were on their knees begging the human invaders for a little mercy. But even so, they were promptly gobbled up by a giant, flaming wolf. Deed asked with a smirk if the demons had said something because he couldn't quite hear them. The city's demon leader complained that the invaders were being way too harsh since they had obviously surrendered. In that instant, Audrea took out the leader with her axe, saying that demons should just stay put and let themselves be defeated. Cow, who was off to the side, quickly handled another demon and told the captain that they were all wrapped up here. Just then, the human captain was having a chat via hologram with Curdly herself, who let him know that a dragon had helped Kella, and she hadn't been able to find him since. After hearing that, Killian commented that he surely couldn't be too far from the Earth Demon's territory, and curtly replied that she had already sent her butterflies out to track them. Killian was delighted by this news and added that Kella probably wouldn't dare show his face in demon territory ever again. So, they needed to get ready and meet up with Curly as soon as possible. A worried Audrey asked what they were going to do about the remaining demons, wondering if they could really just leave them be, since she wanted to wipe them all out right away. But Killian told her to calm down, saying it wouldn't be too late as long as they took out Kella first. The top priority right now was to completely erase the bloodline that was responsible for their brother's fate. Meanwhile, Kella's crew was heading south on unicorns. During their trip, the weather got colder and colder, something everyone in the group started to notice. Shrills explained that it made sense, since they'd been riding south for a whole week straight. Kella felt super lucky that their pursuers hadn't caught up to them during the journey. It would be awesome if they could avoid a showdown with them, at least until all their preparations were complete. All of a sudden, the unicorns just stopped in their tracks, refusing to go any further. Wood explained that the unicorns sensed they couldn't survive the super harsh environment up ahead. Kella understood the situation and said it was all good, since they had arrived exactly where they needed to be, and then he gave the unicorns permission to head back. Wood gave the unicorns a heartfelt thank you for all their help and wished them a safe trip home. Ren got worried, pointing out that in a climate this extreme, neither humans nor demons would be able to last for long. However, Kella replied that this was exactly what they needed, since the unwelcoming region would make it tough for their enemies to follow them. The goal now was to find the absolute best spot to establish their new base. Meanwhile, one of the spy butterflies sent by Curly spotted the unicorns returning on the path. She found it pretty weird, wondering why exactly 4 unicorns were migrating from the south to the north. A little while later, Kella and his companions arrived at an island, ready to kick off the next phase of their plan. Wood said that the cave on the island was without a doubt the best and safest place for them to set up shop. Kella asked if she could check for any monsters inside, but Wood explained that her mind's eye only picked up on nature, so she couldn't detect any living creatures just yet. But as she looked around, Wood noticed that the boats nearby looked like they'd been abandoned for ages. This meant that no one had set foot in the area for a very long time. Even so, the boats still looked like they were in good shape, so the group decided to use them to get to the island. As they paddled towards the island, they figured they were about 200 meters from the shore, which didn't seem too far, but the waves were pretty rough, making the crossing a bit of a challenge. Kella realized that with conditions like these, it'd be super easy to spot any intruders trying to get to the island. At last, the group made it to the cave tucked away on the island. As they stepped inside, Kella asked Shriels if she could whip up an illusion spell at the entrance, and she replied that it would be a piece of cake. A moment later, Shriels conjured a fake stone wall, completely camouflaging the entrance. Kella remarked that clearly, no one had been in this place for a very long time, so he told everyone to spread out and quickly get the lay of the land. Before they did, though, he asked Wood to give them a better rundown of the cave. Using her abilities, she quickly created a mental map, explaining that there were 2 different paths that both led to the same spot. A large, open chamber that ended in a room deep within the cave, which also had a small exit. Kella suggested the group split up to check out both paths at the same time and then meet up in the central chamber. Shriels immediately called dibs on going with Kella, but Ren jumped in and immediately shot that idea down, saying that the heavy hitters should stick together since they had no clue what kind of danger they might run into in these unfamiliar tunnels. Shriels was not thrilled with Ren's comment, but she eventually agreed to go with Wood down the other path. As Shriels and Wood walked together through the freezing tunnel, they noticed glowing stones all over the cave's ceiling, which lit up the entire way. These stones were created from a powerful fusion of light and ice magic. This really surprised Shriels, who said they must have been made by a seriously skilled magician for them to still be glowing today. However, she still wasn't totally sold on Wood and decided to just be upfront about it, pointing out that he was only traveling with them because Kella wanted him to, and that she wasn't the type to warm up to newcomers easily. For a beat, the two just stared at each other. Then Wood calmly said that Shriels didn't need to feel obligated to call him a companion. He sarcastically offered that she could just think of him as a slave if it made her feel better. Totally unmoved, Shriels just turned away and flatly told him she didn't like him. Meanwhile, across the cave, Kella was geeking out over the glowing stones, remarking how awesome it would be if they could whip up some of those light stones themselves. Ren was all for it, promising she could research that for him later, before reminding him to watch his step so he didn't trip over a rock. Kella noticed Ren seemed incredibly fired up all of a sudden and had to wonder what got her so excited out of the blue. Just a little further in, Kella and Ren ran into something unexpected in the tunnel of slime. Kella was immediately thrilled, thinking it was super interesting. Kella thought to himself that he'd only ever seen critters like that in video games and had always wanted to poke one in real life. But Ren just marched up, stepped on the slime, and started tearing it apart, demanding to know how it dared to get in Kella's way. With that, she completely vaporized the creature. Kella, feeling pretty let down, figured she was probably looking for praise and mumbled that she did a good job, even though all he wanted was to touch the slime. Ren absolutely beamed at his words, thanking him and promising he didn't need to worry about a thing because she would take care of everything for him. Later on, the group faced off against a huge golem that was blocking the path. Ola commented on how gigantic the thing was, and Kella told Ren to get behind him, but Ren refused, saying there was no way she'd do that since she promised to protect him and would defeat anything that got in their way. Meanwhile, Sue spotted something that made her jaw drop. It was a necklace made of rare crystals. She gushed about how valuable it was, realizing they had stumbled into a whole room full of treasure. She put the necklace on and asked if it looked nice, but Awood just gave a non-committal grunt. Shrells saw this and got a bit lost in thought, imagining that if it had been Ren, she definitely would have gotten a nice compliment. The fact that Awood didn't even react just cemented her opinion that she really didn't like him. Back on the other side of the room, the golem started attacking Ren, who actually managed to block a few hits and land one of her own. But then she took a direct hit. She was thrown so hard against the wall that she coughed up a ton of blood. Sue was shocked, pointing out that it should be impossible since normal attacks without a weapon should have no effect. Ren, however, insisted she could handle it. But even so, her punch didn't even scratch the golem's stone skin, and she was sent flying again. Sue couldn't understand why she kept trying, but Ren was determined, thinking to herself that at this rate, she wasn't even good enough to be Kella's attendant. She remembered the first day she set foot in the demon castle as a servant. The Demon King had asked his son if he wanted to be friends with the new servant, and a very young Kella had said yes. He wanted to be friends with Ren. The king, who went by Hell, flew into a rage at his answer, saying it was ridiculous, a servant was just a servant, and Kella should form the contract immediately. Crying, Kella apologized to Ren and agreed to make the contract. Ren, however, simply thanked him, because in that moment she understood that he truly wanted to treat her like a friend, not just a servant. And that thought made her feel unbelievably happy, because for the first time in her life, she felt like someone actually saw her as a person. That same night, after Kella had cried himself to sleep, Ren watched over him and made a silent promise that she would protect him and help him until he became the greatest demon of all. She vowed to work as hard as she could for him. Over time, however, Kella grew into someone weak and cowardly, who was constantly getting outsmarted and bullied by his brothers. He would always stumble back to his room saying he'd nearly died again, terrified out of his mind. That's when Ren realized that if he died, she would die, too. And that's why she started acting so tough on him, trying everything she could to make him stronger. Despite her tough exterior, her feelings for him never changed. Even so, Ren was ignored and treated like dirt by the other servants. She only got to eat whatever scraps the others left behind and wasn't even considered worthy of the title of servant. They once poured hot lava over her, and when she slept, she was stuck in the stables, right next to the pigs. It wasn't exactly a safe haven either, since she had a really rough time in there. On top of that, people were spreading rumors that Lord Tarm was only charmed by her good looks. So, pretty much everyone was there just to keep an eye on her. It was then that Ren started to really dislike Kella, thinking that if she could just get rid of him, their contract would finally be over. In a really desperate moment, she actually tried to poke him with the pointy end of a weapon, but he just wouldn't go down. Kella's healing powers were so ridiculously strong, they basically refused to let him check out. Ren was left wondering why he was so hard to get rid of, and why she had to live such a crummy life just because of him. And all Kella could really do was say he was sorry. After that, Ren just sort of gave up, walking around like a zombie who had lost her spark. But then she noticed a sudden shift in him, like he was a completely different person from the guy she knew. In that instant, it all clicked. He was the true heir to the Demon King. Later, during a big fight, she managed to duck another swing from a golem and had a realization. If she was just going to be a burden to Kella, she'd only get in his way. So, with every last bit of strength she had, she swung at the golem's neck and took its head clean off in one swift motion. Ren believed that if she couldn't be useful to Kella, then she didn't deserve to be by his side. So she dropped to her knees before him and declared that she never wanted to leave him. The second Kella tried to speak to her, the golem, believe it or not, started moving again, even without its head. But this time, Kella charged forward without a second thought and landed a perfect punch straight into the creature's chest, smacking it right in its core. And just like that, the golem was down for the count, for good. Seeing that, Ren couldn't help but wonder if she'd been a total bonehead. She had risked her neck so many times, and even when she was in real trouble, Kella had never once abandoned her. She figured that even if she tried to run for it, even if she totally turned her back on him, he would never bring himself to leave her behind. Right then, Kella told her she shouldn't feel bad about what she'd done, and Ren, completely overwhelmed with feelings, ran up and gave her master the tightest hug she could manage. If you're loving the story, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Oh, and ring that little bell so you won't miss any of the upcoming episodes. See you all next time.